Good morning, one and all. If folks will get ready, we'll soon get started on day 2 of ARIN 47, our virtual meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone. We had a great day yesterday, and we're looking for another exciting day today. Next slide. As usual, we're joined by the volunteers who support ARIN, which come in a variety of types. The elected Board of Trustees, Paul Anderson, Chair, Nancy Carter, our Treasurer, myself, I'm not elected, I'm hired, Peter Harrison, Catherine Middleton, Tina Morris, and Bill Sandiford, Vice Chair. We have 6 trustees elected for 3-year terms, 2 each year. And they're the ones that help guide the future of the organization, provide the fiduciary oversight, and help me with setting the direction for where ARIN goes. We also have, next slide, the ARIN Advisory Council, which plays the lead role in policy development at ARIN, working on shepherding various policy proposals into draft policies, recommended draft policies, and then sending them to the board for ratification. They're led by Leif Sawyer, and who's the chair, and Kat Hunter, who's the vice chair. We also have, next slide, members of the NRO Number Council. Again, the group that works on global policy when that comes up, and they do that within the structure of ICANN, where they're known as the ASOAC, the Address Supporting Organization Address Council. And we have 3 members from this region: Kevin Bloomberg, Martin Hannigan, and Louis Lee. You'll be hearing a little more about that later. Next slide. So we reviewed the platform yesterday, but again, raise your hand if you want to be queued for speaking during open mic sessions. During the panels, we generally use the Q&A. Remember, when you submit your question to the panel, include your affiliation. And chat. Chat is for you folks to chat among yourself. That's not for questions to the panel. Okay, next. Be professional, be on topic, follow ARIN standards of behavior. People have been generally very good about that. And I ask that you keep your discussions relevant to the general topics of ARIN and internet number policy. Next. Rules and reminder: when we go through the policy, the chair will moderate the discussion so everyone can be heard. Everyone has an opportunity to speak. You don't need to be an ARIN member or an ARIN customer. We listen to good policy ideas and comments no matter where they come from. Clearly state your name and affiliation. If you're using the Q&A, put your affiliation down, your name if it's not included in your login session within the online meeting. Standards of behavior are in your discussion guide and available online. Generally, they say be courteous to others and professional in your behavior. Next slide. Again, we're recording and live streaming. We will make all the materials available. There will be transcripts. Speak clearly and slowly, unlike me, to help the person doing the transcription. Next. I'd like to thank our bronze sponsor, also the organization that provided yesterday's keynote speaker, which was incredible, Team Cymru. And next slide. We have an important agenda coming up. In the morning, we're going to have a number of reports from around the internet. We'll have the Internet Number Resource Status Report talking about the number resources and where they are in the various RIRs. Mark Costers will give a software update at ARIN. We'll hear from the NRO Number Council. And we'll hear from ARIN's Government Affairs Department, the Government Affairs Report from Ann Rochelle. We'll have global reports from our counterparts at the other RIRs and hear from the IANA, which is also the Public Technical Identifier organization. So that should be exciting. And then we'll have a break, another break, including stretching with ARIN and a word scramble. Should be exciting. We'll move on to a policy block in the afternoon with Draft Policy ARIN 2021-1 ASN clarifications and Draft Policy ARIN 2021-2 special use IPv space out of scope for purposes of waitlist eligibility. We'll do an open mic as we did yesterday, and that'll be a wrap for the day. So it should be a good day. I'm glad to have everyone back, and I look forward to getting kicked off. Our first speaker is John Sweeting, our Chief Customer Officer, who's going to give the Internet Number Resource Status Report. Take it away, John.
All right, thank you, John, and welcome everyone back to the second day here of the ARIN PPML for spring 2021. I'm going to quickly run through the Internet Number Resource Status Report. This is a report that is prepared by all 5 of the RIRs and consolidates all the numbers and gives an update and status on the number resources in each of the regions and a comparative look at that. Next slide, please. So this is just a representation of where all the 256/8s are residing, where they have been given out to. Nothing too interested. This doesn't change much these days. Matter of fact, I don't think it changes at all unless there's a transfer. Well, actually, it doesn't even change then because this is the distribution from IANA. So it doesn't change no matter what happens. Next slide. So this is a look at the total IPv4 addresses that are managed at each of the RIRs. Not a lot interesting there, other than probably, as you could guess, that 99.76 at ARIN, there's a lot of legacy included in that. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Slide. Next slide. My internet is unstable.
Okay, John, do you want me to take it over?
If you can, my internet's unstable, it says. I'm in the office, but can you hear me now?
Okay. We can hear you. Do you know what slide you're on?
I am now on what's showing now is available IPv4 space in each RIR.
Which is what we're seeing.
Okay, awesome.
Very good.
So this is this slide is the available space in each of the RIRs currently. That's available for distribution from what we used to call a free pool. But some of these are special use, and as everyone knows at ARIN, we don't have any that's we can say with any certainty here's how much we have, but we have space that gets returned and we use our waiting list to manage that. Next slide. Okay, internet, this is IPv4 space issued by RIRs in terms of /8s, how much space has each RIR issued per year. As you would guess, this shows that it's gone down and down and down and down. And it will probably go even less for 2021. Not a whole lot interesting with that. Next slide. All right, inter-RIR transfers. Number of transfers per year. This is intra so this is within each of the RIRs. Their customers to other customers within the same RIR. It's steadily going up in most regions. Right leads the way in the number of transfers each year. Next slide. This is the number of addresses transferred by year. And as you can see, it's a little bit of a different story. The number of addresses transferred by year, ARIN is transferring the most when you go by the address count. So there's a big difference in the number of transfers and the number of address blocks, which means there's probably a lot of bigger transfers going on within the ARIN region. Next slide. Okay, this slide is a little busy, but this is the total number of IPv4 transfers between RIRs. We're actually going to be updating the slide to use a table that shows this a lot clearer. But for our purposes here, what this shows is going out from ARIN to AP-NIC there was 327 transfers and coming in 53. Actually, let's go to the next slide so we can just talk about number of addresses rather than number of transfers. That's what's more interesting, I think. From ARIN to AP-NIC is 19.01 million out and 189,000 in. To LACNIC, it's 256 out and 13.82 in, and to RIPE, 8.7 million out and 735.75 thousand in. So as you can see, with the legacy space that ARIN has, the amount of legacy space, there's been a lot of transfers of legacy space outside the region to other regions, which is probably pretty good. Next. Okay, this shows this is where all the current IPv6 address space and how much has been allocated to the RIRs. There were some smaller blocks allocated from IANA to the RIRs earlier on, but today, as you can see, AFRINIC has a /12, AP-NIC has a /12, LACNIC has a /12. ARIN and RIPE are the only two that have gone back to IANA for their second /12. So both ARIN and RIPE are holding a /11 of that space. You can see the space allocated to RIRs before October 2006 on that chart down there. Okay, next slide, please. These are the number of IPv6 allocations allocated that each RIR has allocated through the years. LACNIC is pretty steady. LACNIC transfers a lot of IPv6, allocates a lot of IPv6 out. I think that has something to do. They have a policy that everyone gets IPv6 when they're a LACNIC customer. Not a whole lot of other interesting stuff there, other than it stays pretty steady. It does grow from time to time. If you notice, for ARIN has stayed remarkably steady over the last 10 years. If that means anything to anybody, I don't know, but it seems kind of remarkable to me that it stays so steady. Same with AFRINIC is pretty steady. Okay, next slide, please. The total allocated IPv6 space by RIR. RIPE has allocated the most. And then you see AP-NIC, ARIN, LACNIC, and AFRINIC. Next slide. This is the prefixes that each RIR IPv6 assignments that have been assigned per year. Looks like AP-NIC does a lot of assignments. The rest of it is pretty steady. Nothing that really begs for explanation. Next slide. And this is just the total, all those years totaled up. LACNIC has a lot of assignments, as you can see from the chart. Next slide. So the percentage of members with IPv6 in each RIR, and it's this slide's a little bit weird. I believe that 9.1, those pieces floating over the top, I think are members with IPv6 only. Yeah, it was supposed to, it should show something different, but anyway, so for the total for ARIN, members with IPv6 is 60.1%. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to talk about the AS numbers. This is just, again, a slide that shows where all the AS numbers are allocated out to at this point in time. Next slide. How many ASNs each RIR issues per year? And that's broken down by 32-bit and 16-bit. I'm just pausing here to give everybody a chance to look at it. Not a whole lot to say about it. It is what it is. These are the numbers. Next slide. I'm sure everybody could guess that this was the total. This slide would be the total ASNs assigned by each RIR. The floating number is the 32-bit number, I would guess. These slides, apologize for the slides. I'm not sure what happened on the rendering of these. Next slide, please. This is the reference for where you can find these slides and these statistics on the NRO site, and also for the IANA number resources on the IANA site. Next slide. Okay, that's it. That is a look at where all the number resources in the world are residing these days, and what each of the RIRs are doing annually.
Thank you. And just to clarify for those as we open it up for questions, please make sure that you note if your name in Zoom is not your first and last name, that you note your first and last name as well as your affiliation when you ask your questions. If you choose to raise your hand, leave that hand up as we will toggle back and forth between questions and answers. Currently, Mr. Sweeting, it looks like we have one question from Mercedes Arnold at the Obsidian Group asking if are transfers by governments, ISP companies, or by end users?
Yeah, so the quick answer to that is the transfers are done by the RIRs to the RIRs, and but they're originating with customers of the RIR. So if it's an intra within ARIN, it's a customer of ARIN transferring to another customer of ARIN. So there is a source and a recipient for that transfer. They could be governments, they could be ISPs, they could be end users. They are just organizations that have number resources from ARIN. If it's an ARIN customer transferring to a RIPE customer, then it's ARIN working with RIPE staff to actually complete the transfer between those customers. And again, they could be government, ISPs, or end users. They just have to be customers of that RIR that they're doing the transfer through.
Thank you. It does not look like we have any further questions. I'll turn that back over to, I believe, to Mr. Curran to introduce the next speaker.
Okay, very good. And I'm working on that video thing. Okay, thank you. Our next presentation will be Mark Costers, and he'll be giving the ARIN software update. Mark, take it away.
Okay, thank you, John. So I am going to go around and give you a brief tour of ARIN's engineering team. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Before I begin, it's kind of funny. Both Mr. Sweeting and I are in the office today. I'm in the office today because there's construction going on in my neighborhood, and I didn't want to leave anything to chance. And here we have just a bit of a hiccup at our network at the office, but I think everything's okay now. So anyways, let's go on with our agenda. We have a bit of development history that I want to talk about. Prioritization. How does engineering actually figure out what's going to go on? What we have done since ARIN 46 and what we plan on doing, or actually 47, and what do we plan on doing for the remainder of 2021? Next slide, please. Development history. Next slide, please. So I started in ARIN back in 2007. And at that point, we were a Perl shop, and we also used Waterfall. And it became fairly apparent that we needed to make some changes. So we did a number of different things. One is we went to Java. So most of our application development now is in Java. And we moved to an agile environment. And that's worked out really well for us. Our first sprint was completed in December 2009, and we've completed 170 sprints since then. Sprint durations are now 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, with a 2-week release hardening sprint right before deployment. And one of the things that's interesting here is that we have, after each sprint, we actually have a sprint review and planning where we go through and say, this is what this team has done and what they've developed over this past sprint, and actually review it with interested parties within ARIN's company, within the company of ARIN. So it's well seen by those who are interested on what we're doing. Since that time, we've had 67 planned releases since 2008. And we've had many other minor releases during that time. Most of them you don't see because we have now gone to a development, actual operational environment where we can make changes without any interruption to the public. Most of our releases are no longer customer impacting as a result. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about prioritization. Here are the factors that influence priorities. It's not, hey, this is what engineering wants to do and this is what we're going to do. There's a number of things that actually are influence our priorities. And these are all things that are approved and acknowledged by Mr. Kern and also Mr. Jimerson. And there's a number of things that are used as part of our plan as we go forward, what we plan on doing. And here are the factors that influence our priorities: Board of Trustee initiatives, legal and regulatory requirements, ratified policies that need development or implementation changes, ACSPs, operating plan objectives. Hey, we got to change out this piece of hardware because it's about ready to fail. Defects, maintenance, and upgrades, just something that we have to do. Almost every engineering team has to do this. Environmental changes. We are moving different offices. Customer feedback via the feedback button or otherwise. Customer surveys and mailing list requests. All these things actually play a role in setting up our plan for the current year and also for the upcoming years. So we typically do a 2-year plan. Next slide, please. So what have we completed since ARIN 46 into ARIN 47? Next slide, please. So our themes have been decrease our technical debt. You've heard me speak a number of times in the past about our technical debt, and we're doing a tremendous amount of work here and having a tremendous amount of success in reducing our technical debt. We plan on continue to iterate on the IRR that's going on and upgrading our backend services and monitoring. Next slide, please. Here's what we've done. And here are the things that are external that you've seen. We've rolled out a base level API for the IRR. So there's now a RESTful service for people to add and remove routes, et cetera, within our using a RESTful API. We also put out an RDAP Bootstrap server that's released on GitHub, including a Docker image. So if you wanted to run an RDAP Bootstrap server, you can do so. We've increased our CRR limits on RPKI. That we used to have a very hard limit based on hardware limitations on our high security module that's now been removed. And now we basically can deal with as many as rows as we currently have in our inventory. We fixed a delegated RPKI issue in OT&E, so customers wouldn't have to request RSD to make a change. This is actually now seamless. We've updated our RDAP Bootstrap endpoints in NIC-Info and fixed some bugs as well. NIC-Info is a client that's universally used by the community. RDAP community is probably one of the most prevalent uses and highest use of RDAP using the NIC-Info client. We're not sending annual validation emails to reassignment POCs anymore per policy. We're doing an upgrade to CentOS 7 across the board. We were running CentOS 6. All our publicly available instances are running CentOS 7 or other variants of BSD. So we're fairly recent on our OSs across our public infrastructure. We've removed all our public NetApp appliances. One of these, as you may recall, actually gave us some troubles about a year and a half ago. So all our publicly available NetApps are now gone, and they've been replaced. We've removed SSL 1.1 support, and we will soon be adding SSL 1.3 support. We are adding CAPTCHA to the ARIN online process, and I talked about that yesterday. We anticasted a very busy DNS secondary box that's has a huge amount of traffic. It's now going across our 3 public-facing sites that we have, one in Dulles, one in Seattle, and one in San Jose. We've moved board and AC support to a cloud-based solution, and we have a service status dashboard. Let's go on the next slide, please. Here is the service status dashboard. You can now see via the web, you can actually see the availability of our services. Outage notifications will be displayed here, and you can also subscribe to it, so you can actually get notifications. You don't always have to pull the website to see what's going on. So, and there's a whole variety of ways to actually get this information. Next slide, please. What we've done internally that you haven't seen, or actually you may see in the near future, we have a DNSSEC appliance. It's called Secure 64, and we've recently upgraded it, and we are going to move to a more modern algorithm. We're currently on algorithm 5, which is being deprecated, and we will be moving to algorithm 8. So you will be seeing this in the upcoming months. We're going about this very carefully so that we don't have any issues. We've had lots of tech debt and inner software that we've replaced, dealing with the management application as well as our zone generator. We also are put in place reporting and analysis of third-party issues that we have within ARIN Online. We have a dependency checker that we check against, as well as a security review audit appliance called SonarQube. We have better security monitoring put in place, and we've been focusing on moving internal services into the cloud. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, what do we have in plan? Next slide, please. We plan on continuing to iterate on the IRR. There's more API endpoints coming out with IRR that you will soon see. Well, we have some work to do with Premier Services that was announced yesterday to make it easier for RSD. We plan on adding new features to RPKI. Things that we have, one that's fairly near is adding RRDP instances to the cloud. Repositories can be fetched by one of 2 ways. One is a web-based protocol called RRDP, which is pretty easy to put in the cloud, and the other one is via the rsync protocol, which is a little bit harder to put into the protocol. We also are planning on supporting a hosted repository service for delegated customers. There's been a number of people have been asking Brad Gorman for this, and something I'm sure we will be working on. And also the synchronization of IRR and RPKI objects. We plan on doing improved login security following our NIST guidelines that we talked about yesterday. And regarding a question that RS asked yesterday in terms of what our password guidelines are in terms of lengths, the NIST guidelines are a minimum of 8 characters and a maximum, or the maximum being no less than 64 characters. Our current implementation has 12 as a minimum, which can be variable. And currently the maximum is set at 64. We are working on an integration of a third-party election system, integrating a new one, rolling out new and adder zones that I mentioned before with a more modern algorithm, and updating our load balancers to the latest so that we can support SSL 1.3. Next slide, please. Internally, we're moving more and more services into the cloud that are currently hosted by ARIN. So I did a count a little bit earlier today, and we currently have 10 services that we are currently using on relying on the cloud for our systems. And this goes from laptop backups all the way through things like doing management of laptops. And we're planning on doing 3 more, and we have 2 more that are under evaluation on whether or not they're going to be cost effective to be put into the cloud. We're going to be upgrading our PBX. You may have heard of an issue we had with our phone system being down. It's currently using very old technology, using a PRI, using the plain old telephone network for us to gain access, which is interesting because we have a converter that actually moves it to SIP internally. Then it actually is distributed to the various people who have extensions like the help desk, both RSD and FSD. And we've moved CentOS 6 boxes to CentOS 7. We're moving more and more technical debt by upgrading our software. We're updating our internal Windows software, making our billing application fully redundant, upgrading our our security video monitoring gear. So this is gear that we have to actually make sure that our office is secure in the evenings. If we get alarm, we can, at some sort of tamper alarm, we can actually check the video system to see if anyone's actually tried to enter the facility. So we can do that remotely. We're hardening our laptop support for zero-touch management, which is important in today's COVID environment. Upgrading our monitoring system so that we can support fully redundant sites in terms of where the monitoring head is. We're doing improvements on our high availability infrastructure, as well as a hardware refresh on older gear. Okay, next slide, please. So, and here goes to the bonus. In the next slide, please. These are slides I always like to show. And this is who is RWS, the amount of traffic that we see. And what's interesting about this is that we see just an amazing amount of traffic on our directory service infrastructure. And this is amazing in comparison to what the other regional registries see. And I think it's because that we're essentially the legacy RIR, even though that we're the third in line in terms of its inception. ARIN actually came from the internet, which actually came from SRINIC and so on from the way back when. And people default to our services to figure out where they need to go for their directory service question. So you can see here that we have quite a bit of traffic. 2,500 queries per second. It's gone down a little bit. It's been as high as 4,000 queries a second. Now it's currently sort of settled down to 2,500 queries per second, at least for now. Okay, and that's on port 43. Okay, next slide, please. And this is another interesting slide, and this is RDAP. And you can see by the blue line here that here's our traffic on V4. We're seeing about 150 queries per second. This is a comparison to other regional registries seeing about 30. We're seeing about 150 on V4. And actually, one of the things I find kind of interesting is that V6, we're starting to see a little bit of traffic. You can see that we're still on the low side, maybe between 5 and 10 queries per second, but you can see that we're finally seeing some traffic over V6. And that's mainly because RDAP's a fairly modern protocol, has a modern client that you can use. And if your host that uses that RDAP client actually supports V6, it will use V6. So anyways, next slide, please. That is the end of my presentation, and I think I'm 5 minutes over.
That's okay. We'll forgive you for that with all that information you had to cover. Reminder to everybody again to please make sure your name and affiliation are connected to your questions. Now is the time to get those questions in, as well as raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Currently, I've got a couple questions for you, Mark. Kevin Bloomberg from The Wire is curious why you're migrating to CentOS 7, which has an EOL of 3 years and is now considered very dated.
Yeah, CentOS 8 is something that we're not sure we want to go to at this point in time, because we like the idea of having sort of regular releases that are timed, and so we haven't moved to that yet. So CentOS 7 is at least here for 3 years, and that gives us some opportunity to figure out what we want to do next. So good question, though. Very good question.
Thanks. And Gary Geeson from Central Logic, also ARIN AC. We're planning on relying on free services like HIBP. Is ARIN contributing back to those services, either with financial assistance or technical assistance?
Sorry, can you re-ask that question again?
Sure. Planning on relying on free services like HIBP.
Okay.
And he wants to know whether ARIN is contributing back to those services.
Not at this point in time, but that's something I'm sure that we will consider. I think Mr. Kern may want to answer.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. We can, I don't know whether or not there's an option for contributing, but we'll go check. It's possible we might need someone to sponsor that contribution. What I mean by that is it may be that we need to double check. That'd be the type of thing that we could do as a grant, for example, periodically. It's not quite a purchase of service, so it wouldn't be a normal expense we just do. But if the community thought that the value of the service was high and it was something that ARIN should contribute to, that might be something that we could consider. I'll need to look at the various ways we can fund or contribute to that and see which one makes sense.
Thank you, John. So one of the things that we're doing within ARIN, which is actually fairly new, is that many of the tools that we're putting out actually we're putting out in the public domain as well, and which is fairly new for ARIN to do with NIC Info as well as the RDAP Bootstrap client. There's a number of other tools that are in our ARIN's GitHub repository that you're more than welcome to take a look at and use.
Thank you so much. Last chance if anyone has any further questions or would like to raise their hand and share or ask questions. Looks like our queues are clear right now. Thanks, Mark. I will turn it back over to Mr. Curran to introduce our next presentation.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Our next speaker will be Kevin Bloomberg, and he'll be presenting the NRO Number Resource Organization Number Council update. Take it away, Kevin.
Good afternoon from not so sunny Canada. I'm Kevin Bloomberg. I'm the chair of the ASO-AC, and I will be doing the update today. The ASO-AC, also referred to as the NRO Number Council, towards RIRs, we're called the NRO Number Council, and towards ICANN, we're called the ASO-AC, just to avoid any confusion. Effectively, it's the same terminology at play. We are 15 members, 3 from each region. 2 are elected and 1 is appointed by the respective RIR board. We also have a number of RIR and ICANN observers that join us regularly on calls. The term of office is different for each year, but for the ARIN region, it is 3 years. The ASO/AC's primary role is to oversee global policy development. We have a set of procedures that are detailed on our website, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. But our main goal is being there for global policy development. We as well elect or appoint, I should say, 2 members to the ICANN board for seats 9 and 10. We appoint a member to the ICANN NOMCOM, and as well, as requested, we will advise the ICANN board as part of things. We meet telephonically over Zoom once a month, usually on a Wednesday at noon UTC. We have a face-to-face as well annually. Usually it's at the first ICANN meeting of the year. This year it was canceled. As you can see, here are all of the different ASO/AC members for the various regions. As I mentioned earlier, this year I am the chair. Mike Silber from the Afrinic region and Hervé Clement from RIPE NCC are the vice chairs. So when we're talking about global policy development, the first thing is to be able to know when a global policy is being formulated. To be able to do that, we have what are called PPFTs, Policy Proposal Facilitator Team members. Martin Hannigan in the ARIN region handles that function for us for 2021. And their main goal is to monitor RIR activity, notify the ASO/AC if a policy is being submitted in the respective region. And then we can start within our policy development process, making sure that it is being submitted to all the regions. If the author would like us to submit it on their behalf in some of the regions, etc. There are a number of different situations, but the goal is that we aren't writing the policies. We are making sure that they conform and are standardized across the regions, that they've passed, that they followed their processes before going up, that they are a global policy global policy, etc. But we don't actually write or input into the validity of that aspect of it. So the global policy development process was last used a couple of years ago. Generally speaking, you're between all of the different RIR timelines, from inception to completion, you're probably looking at 18 to 24 months, just based on the various requirements of each RIR and making sure that everything is, as mentioned, equivalent. During our last ASO review, which is done every 5 years, one key recommendation was that we open up as much as possible, wherever possible, to the public, our deliberations and the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. To be able to facilitate that, all of our face-to-face meetings are now open. Our AC Discuss mailing list is open. Our monthly teleconferences are open. They're listed there, the link to be able to view, and if you'd like to join, they're there. We maintain a public record of all ASO/AC participation. So pretty much at this point today, in 2021, almost everything related to the ASO/AC is open and available for observers. The only thing that is not are deliberations related to appointments. And let's go to the current appointments. So for seat 10 on the ICANN board, Mayamura Akinori, his term ends at the end of 2022. For seat 9, we have Ron De Silva, whose term ends at the end of 21. For the ICANN NOMCOM, we have Panjak Chaturvedi, and I apologize if I got the names pronounced a little wrong, and his term does come due at the end of the NOMCOM cycle for 2021, and Hervé Clement for the ICANN Ethos Awards. So our timeline for the board seat 9, because a lot of work does go into that. This year we had 10 candidates at the beginning of the process. It stretches all the way from September to just into May now. It was revised slightly at the end of March. We added approximately a 2-week extension to the period to allow for a third round of what would have been normally in-person interviews. We're doing them by video, so to allow for that. One key date for everybody who is on this call or at the ARIN meeting is that on April 13th, at the end of the April 13th, the comment flow phase closes. And on the 14th, the ASO/AC starts its final deliberations. So for everybody on the call, if there is some comment that you'd like to make, it is available on the ASO website. You can go and publicly leave a statement of support as example. You do have a couple hours left to be able to do that. That would be appreciated I'm sure, by all the candidates. So I did want to mention that the comment phase is closing at the end of today. So please, if you do have the opportunity, post something. The last thing that we'll be working on, again, shortly is going to be the ASO representative to the NOMCOM. The NOMCOM is responsible for many, many of the ICANN board members, and as part of the MOU between ICANN and the NRO, we appoint one member to sit on that body. And that is it for today. I hope everybody is staying safe. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
I see no questions in the queue. So we will move right ahead. Our next speaker will be the Government Affairs Update by Anne Rochelle N. Anne Rochelle, take it away.
Thank you very much, John. Good day, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly. So I'm going to give you the Government Affairs Department update. And the Government Affairs is made up of 4 people: myself, Einar Bowling, who is our public policy manager, Leslie Nobile, who's taking care of our law enforcement activities and so public trust out there, and also Bevel Woodard. Bevel is our Director of Caribbean Affairs. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about, international internet public policy, not the type of public policy that we do, governments, how we interact with them, law enforcement and public safety, and also touch a little bit on the Caribbean affairs and what we do there. Next slide, please. There you go. So before I engage and go through the rest of the slides, I would like to say a little something about one of our community friends lately at beginning of the month of April said in National IGF that that internet governance is no longer a technical problem with political implications, that it's become a political problem with a technical component. And I tend to really believe him, given all of the things that we're hearing nowadays. It's kind of even rare that outside our settings and the IGF and others that we hear about internet governance. It's all about digital governance, the governance of the digital future, of the digital society, of the digital economy. So it's all the more important that we engage in, awareness raising and capacity building, because it is very important that governments and their affiliates in general and their strategic partners understand how the internet works and who at WSIS were deemed to be part of the technical community. So that's part of our outreach, and that's how we get insights, and that's how that's the reason why we engage, and we engage in we participate in regional our own regions governments activities, regional organizations, but also international discussions that can impact ARIN. As an example, we go to OECD right now, in their work around going digital, for example, at OECD, they talk about anywhere from critical infrastructure to digital security, privacy, data transfers, taxation. Taxation, why we're looking at it, because as John showed you one of those slides on transfers, for example, a lot of governments or people who do not engage with us on a daily basis tend to believe that regional internet registries actually make a lot of money in transfers, because they are, of course, seeing what is happening out there, and they understand that V4 addresses now have some value. So part of the things that we have to deal with are, for example, questions around why are you selling IP addresses and how much are you making? So we have to explain all of these things, so we're not part of taxation talks, for example, going forward. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that we do to strengthen the ARIN community and in our own region, foster the interregional collaboration between our own governments. When we do things in the Caribbean, for example, we tend to invite, the US and Canada, and vice versa. We increase the Caribbean contribution because as policymakers and people understand how the technical community and the number resource community as a whole, operates, they tend to be a lot more interested. We support, of course, by doing that, we support the international internet public policy development process, and we share, our own community's position when time comes. Next slide. So these are some of the international trends that we're tracking pretty closely. As I told you, when people talk today about digital society or digital economy, they tend to look at the full chain of actors, really, on how the internet works and who are the actors in there, what they are doing, how much they're making, can we tax them or not? Are they legitimate? The elephant in the room, basically, since WSIS has always been, that in the organizations that are part of the technical community, what is their legitimacy out there, and what makes their legitimacy in a sense, and how can we interact with them? Because often they have the tendency to think that they're not really, they're outside of the community that is ours. And we have to remind them, for example, that no, your network operators are part of our community. They're actually our members. So definitely, let's sit down and talk about what is going on. So when you look at, for example, infrastructure today, just about everywhere, from our service region to the UN level, to CARICOM, to OECD, everybody is talking about critical infrastructure. What is critical infrastructure? It's all of the networks today that carry, the electrical grid, that carry health, hospitals, education, more than ever, these sectors have become something really, really important since the pandemic, and the fact that everybody wants now to be connected and to have access. When you go to the economic level, we have issues of e-commerce. Again, when the economy fails, or one part of the economy fails, let's say, the financial sector, parts of the financial sector fail, who's accountable? What are the networks that are involved? Are regional internet registries, folks that we can go to? So these are all, again, the discovery really along the chain of actors is very, it is progressing, I would say, in a way that it hasn't before. When you go to development and capacity building, yes, everybody has to go online. So how do we make sure that everybody has the capacity, to be online? How do we actually make sure that those networks are properly connected? What is involved in the connectivity and the access? On the legal side, jurisdiction has always been one of the issues that we have had problems with in terms of, explaining to the community why, the historical basis of the internet, for example, has made it that, a lot of the big networks and ISPs are in developed countries. Human rights. So is access a human right? And then again, if it is, who's accountable when those rights are abridged? And security has become just, it's everywhere. We have from the United Nations government group of experts to the open-ended working group to the two United Nations General Assembly committees that are dealing with security and cybersecurity and ICTs, to what I told you the OECD is doing lately, digital economy and security in the digital economy. Security has really become also the crux of any type of thoughts globally. And hopefully that will not be, the means of taking us to internet fragmentation. Next slide, please. There we go. So that's how we, we discover by monitoring the discussions, for example, around, yes, nationalization, jurisdiction security. We have heard from different regions nowadays that some are even talking about digital sovereignty as a means of basically having, anywhere from looking at root servers or, looking at registries, as being part of the digital sovereignty of regions or countries. So these are the things that we need to interpret and then talk to the governments to see, to first tell them who we are and the reasons why basically they should leave us alone to do our job and look into the plethora of regulations that are coming to make sure that we are ahead of them and we can find the points where issues are. This is actually what we're doing with our colleagues from the other regional internet registries and the Internet Technical Advisory Committee at OECD, because there's lately, in the work on security and going digital, there is a draft, for example, that is specifically addressing routing and DNS. And then, of course, we keep our management and the community apprised. So here, really, I would like to appeal to all of our members. Whenever you get the opportunity to talk to the governments, to talk to regional organizations, please engage and talk to them about what we're doing. It is important that, as many of us get out there and talk to them about who we are and the reasons why, again, that they should leave us alone, if at all possible. Next slide. So these are some of the forums that we participate in. I don't think there's much to say here, but it's really, the more collaboration we can get between us and governments, I think the better for us, because it is important that they understand where we come from in doing the job that we're doing, and not simply say, leave us alone, we know what we're doing. Because no, the internet is now, 40, 50 and more of their economy, and they won't leave us alone, that's for sure. So next slide, please. In doing that, one of the things that we're doing, especially in the Caribbean nowadays, is to foster more work with the high-level officials. Also, we have a upcoming Caribbean forum. We're going to start ARIN LACNIC Justice Forum, and we're going to do an ARIN forum for law enforcement also, and how we collaborate with them. Next slide. There you go. So these are the community-driven priorities in talking to CTU, to CARICOM, to the governments in the Caribbean region. They want more support in developing, the international internet public policies, because among the governments that are in the Caribbean and in our region, we have 10 that are members of the UN and 9 that are members of ITU. So that participate on a daily basis in things that are happening at ITU, for example, on standards, on capacity building. They're hearing things like new IP or future vertical communication networks. What does that mean for them? And all of that. So yes, that's one of the reasons why we engage in heavily on the government side, and also LEAs. LEAs, why? Because of security. Security has become a global thing, and I think you all know that our WHOIS database has been used anyway for the longest time by law enforcement people. But also, as we go more and more online by, for example, intellectual property people, because it's becoming our WHOIS is one of the ones that is open now, given what is happening, at domain names level. So, and again, we do this, of course, the hand holding on a individual basis or multilateral basis with the high-level officials. Next slide. So these are some of the activities that we have for this year. We continue, of course, working the coordination calls, one-on-one meetings with the governments in the region. We participate in the regional organizations like CTEL. CTEL is the mechanism that we have in the Organization of American States, so our region, to basically develop the priorities and the interactions for example, at ITU level, the World Telecommunication Development Conference that is going to take place in November this year, if possible. And also the World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly. There are 2 of the big ITU conferences. So WTDC is for the D sector and WTSA is for the T sector on standardization. Excuse me. And then we continue, of course, practically on a daily basis, our meetings or with all of the different study groups at ITU. Just as an example, I'm going to give you a few study groups that we, participate in at ITU. So study group 3, for example, it looks at all of the economic policies and OTT taxation. We want to make sure that they don't confuse us with over the top or operators in terms of taxation. Study group 11 talks about conformance and interoperability. Study group 13 is the one where all of the discussions happened on new IP and future vertical networks. Study group 17 is specifically on cybersecurity. Study group 20 is on standardization requirements and technologies for IoT and all of that. And and we even have, resurfacing interest in national internet registries at TSAT level. So really, really a lot of work at OECD level. As I told you, going digital, all of the aspects of going digital, and at the UN, I told you about the different working groups and the United Nations General Assembly committees that we monitor. So next month, we have a Caribbean forum that is going to take place in 2 days. The first day, we are having mostly international internet public policy related discussions. We are inviting Doreen Bogdan-Martin. Doreen is the director of ITUD, so the development sector, and she's from our region. And our governments are definitely very much interested in hearing from her, especially going into the World Telecommunication Development Conference that I told you is happening normally this year. We'll also have our one and only John Curran, and quite a few other speakers are lined up for this event that I think will be really very interesting. We also, on the second day, are going to have a technical group forum with CARIBNOG, and I think this one will also be pretty interesting because the region is very much looking at how to connect right now. It is a region that has traditionally relied on satellite, for example, and they're looking at all of these ways of connecting, and then, of course, we help them for the next steps. In June, we're going to have so we were hoping we will have the ARIN high-level official forum, like an inaugural meeting. We hope it's still going to take place, but it might be a little bit less of what we thought, because we're waiting for information from the region to see if the officials will be available. And then on the 16th of June, we're having the ARIN Symposium for Judicial Officials, where we will also be co-opting our General Counsel to be part of the talks with people from that region. So we will make sure that all of this is posted, and I think some of them are already tentatively posted, but all of the information, for example, for registration and all of that will come as of end of this month at most. And we will make sure also for the last quarter that you get updated for at ARIN 48. Next slide. And that's it from me, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a reminder that we are opening up the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A window. Remember to include your name and company information, or you can always put your hand up and we will acknowledge you in the order that the question was received. We do have one question in the window. It's from Mercia with the Obsidian Group. How are communication satellites treated as a government affairs matter? Are satellites based on the country they launched from or the country they serve?
Anne Rochelle, do you want me to take that one?
So, yes, go ahead, John.
So recognize that per se, it's not really a question of countries versus companies. The communication satellites are something that exists as infrastructure, just like international, just like undersea fiber is internet is infrastructure. All of them have owners that are often private investors, private telecommunications, but governments are very interested in where telecommunications undersea cables are very interested in the footprint of communication satellites. So even though they're not government property per se, the governments are very interested because you have governments on occasion that wish to control the information in and out of the country. That requires knowing what the infrastructure looks like. So it becomes a government affairs matter when governments want to know how the internet's put together so that they can exercise control over parts of it. As a government, the internet's a very mysterious thing. Think about this for a moment. Telecommunications in many countries was controlled by a single government. The government in the country licensed the main telecommunications operator, and all of the phone services, all of the transport were provided by one operator, completely under government control. The internet appears, and now it's unclear how these providers are appearing that are serving your customer, serving your citizens, serving your businesses. And you don't have a department of the internet. You have a telecom department, and that does do something with phone lines. But when you actually say who's in charge of the internet in your country, in the vast majority of these countries, there is no good answer for them. There is no one in charge. And in fact, the businesses operating in a given country doing internet services may not even be known, listed, or regulated. And so communication satellites are the specific case, but governments are very interested in which communication satellites have a footprint serving their customers and whether or not they can regulate them or control that footprint. Probably more than you wanted to, but I wanted to give a full answer there.
Thanks very
Anything
much,
else for
John.
Anne Rochelle?
And
Yes, actually, we do have a hand raised. Sai, I am going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please state your name and your company.
Hi, my name is Saidlu Mattapalli. I am from Mattapalli Technologies, a non-profit organization. I'm trying to do telecommunication from India, where one village don't have internet. So actually, I have write that project proposal also submitted to ARIN as a grant fellowship. So the idea is, so you said that the satellites are not regulated in some country, but as I'm an Indian citizen, I only little bit have the knowledge about this internet regulation in India. Means I have written that my idea how we can use a, means if you have a satellite, how this backhaul is regulated. So internet regulation is this one, and how is backhaul is regulated? That is my question.
Yeah, that would be something that you would need to take up with each individual country. So that's something you need to take up with the government in India if you want to talk about the backhaul regulation in India.
yes, and actually,
How it
you
is
should go
in
to the
USA are
regulator.
common. How it is in USA are common? Can you have any? So I want to learn, right? First to ask them.
I would say the ARIN focuses on the IP addresses and their administration. We do spend quite a bit of time educating governments about how the internet works and how IP addresses are used in construction of the internet, but we are not a regulatory body and we don't deal with government regulatory matters over infrastructure such as fiber, intersea fiber, satellite, spectrum. All of those are government matters for each individual respective economy.
Okay, that is all the questions I see.
Wonderful. If you allow me, I'll just say, I will just add for Mercia that this is actually something that is very much on the plate at the international telecommunication, radio communication sector right now, with everybody going after their own constellations to offer the internet internationally. The orbital slots are completely crowded and it's becoming a huge issue internationally. So the next World Radio Communication Conference is definitely going to be about all of these things. Thank you very much for being here. And if you have any other questions, you can leave them in the chat and I will try and answer. Thank you, John. Thank you all.
Thank you, Angel. So moving on to our next session, we're going to have the global reports from our fellow RIRs, and Kim Davies also presenting from IANA PTI. So take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, good day. I'm Madhvi Gokul. I work as a Senior IP Resource Specialist at AFRINIC. It is a pleasure for me to present to you the AFRINIC report during the ARIN 47 meeting today. AFRINIC is the 5th regional internet registry, and our service region is 55 economies on the African continent and the Indian Ocean islands. We have 54 staff who work in providing services to our members and community. Let us talk about some numbers now. In 2020, AFRINIC grew by 191 new members, and it closed the year with a total of 1,951 resource members. In regard to internet number resources, slightly over 1 million of IPv4 addresses were distributed or delegated to the AFRINIC resource members. In accordance with the AFRINIC policies, 105/32s of IPv6 address space were issued and 210 AS numbers assigned to our resource members. In regard to IPv4 addresses exhaustion, AFRINIC still has 1.85 million of IP addresses in its pool. On the 13th of January 2020, AFRINIC reached soft landing phase 2, which meant at that time that it had only 1/11 worth of IP resources available in its inventory. And as from the 13th of January, the rules for allocation or assignment of IP addresses changed. The size, the maximum that can be issued in any request that is evaluated and in accordance with the policies is a /22. However, the AFRINIC resource members can come and request as many /22s as they need. As long as they can justify the need, they can get these resources. The policy landscape at AFRINIC has been very active. Currently, we have 10 proposals that are under discussion, and 2 proposals reached consensus after the public policy meeting in September 2020. Of these 2 proposals, one's ratification report has not been sent or received by the board, while the other one, the inter-RIR transfer policy proposal, is currently under appeal. Now, an assessment of these 10 proposals currently under discussion shows that some of these proposals aim at modifying some aspects of the policy development process. Now, the policy development process is also a policy, and it is documented in Section 3 of the AFRINIC Consolidated Policy Manual. Right? And the other proposals, they are technical proposals. For example, the resource transfer policies, the policy compliance dashboard, the RPKI ROAs, the abuse contact policy updates. So these are technical policies aimed towards resource management. Capacity building in IPv6 has remained a key activity at AFRINIC. Over 1,900 professionals have participated in 20 webinars. The IPv6 help desk attended to 227 requests, 866 participants enrolled in our e-learning courses, and 30 participants took part in 2 IPv6 deployathons. The outreach and engagement activities conducted by ARIN had to be adapted to the global pandemic situation in 2020. Most of them went online. And the projects completed are as follows. The Africa Internet Summit 2020 was held online with over 500 attendees. AFRINIC supported 12 regional NOGs, IGFs, and technical community events. AFRINIC also participated in 9 government roundtable meetings and conducted 17 community outreaches. 4 MOUs were signed with governments for a total amount of 9 projects. Which brings us to the last slide. The next Africa Internet Summit 2021 will be held in online format 31st of May to 4th of June 2021. The public policy meeting will also be on the agenda during that week. We invite you to participate in our event, and thank you very much for your attention. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.
Hi everyone, my name is Sanjaya, Deputy General of APNIC. I'm happy to provide you a quick update of APNIC activities at this ARIN 47 online meeting. I'm going to just cover 3 major things that I think it's worth sharing from the APNIC community. First one is the deployment of AS0 ROA for unallocated space. And then second one, I will talk about the increase in our internet development activities. And thirdly, I will cover a little bit of what's happening with COVID-19 in our region, the impact to our members and our operations. So with that, I'll start with the first one, and that's the AS0 for unallocated space. So this came up from the proposal in our policy discussion group that receives a good support from the committee for APNIC to publish a ROA under AS0 for all its unallocated and unassigned resources. It will be, should be implemented according to RFC 6483, and that covers undelegated IPv4 and IPv6. We developed that last year, and September we put it out on production last year. And just to be on the safe side, we actually publish it under a different trust anchor from our main RPKI hierarchy. So people who, relying party who wants to use this service would actually have to add this additional trust anchor. So it needs to be a very deliberate operation from them to consume this information. The way it works is we will publish it, and then whenever there is a delegation that our hostmaster made to a member, then within 5 minutes, that prefix that was delegated will be removed from the AS0 ROA. So far so good. Since we deployed it in September, we've got, by September, we had 24 AS numbers fetching regularly from the service, and that's coming from big networks actually. The AS0 ROA itself, it's quite big. The size is about 1 million bytes, 1 megabyte, and it contains about 1,500 IPv4 prefixes and more than 64,000 IPv6 prefixes. The reason why we have large IPv6 prefixes there is because of APNIC's way of delegating from our pool in a sparse manner. So there's a lot of clumps of IPv6 over the space that we have. So that's AS0 for unallocated space. The second one I want to share is about the increased internet development activities. As You probably know that APNIC has a foundation called APNIC Foundation that is raising funds to support the development activities at APNIC, and the development activity is part of our bylaw, so it is something that is expected to be done by the APNIC Secretariat. So the foundation continues to raise internet development funding from various organizations, and recently get more funding from Asia Pacific Internet Development Trust, or APIDT, that managed the fund from the auction of IPv4 address that was historically delegated to the White Project in Japan. Quite a substantial amount there. So with this additional funding, APNIC development activities in 2021 will be significantly increased, including increased face-to-face training resources, more staff trainers, as well as community trainers, which we recruit from the community themselves. So we got a team of trainers who on a daily basis operate networks, and therefore their the skill that they share is very current. We also increased the curriculum and content development of APNIC Academy online platform. And then with the additional funding, we will do more support for infrastructure development projects such as root server deployment. In particular, this year we'll be focusing on mRoot, that happens to be from the Asia region, and also helping others to set up internet exchange and any infrastructure development that needs to be done in the region. So that's on increased internet development activities. And last but not least is to give you a quick update of what happens with COVID-19 in this region. Number one is luckily it doesn't affect the membership growth. So the membership growth is still in 2020 is still according to what we anticipated in the budget. So no impact to that. There has been some requests on billing or payment deferment for those who are affected by the pandemic, and we provide that. No time limitation. We will allow people to just take whatever time the members need to catch up with their payment, and luckily, within a few months, usually they're all caught up. So not much impact there. There is a big impact on reduction of APNIC operational costs, particularly from travel, because we can no longer travel. So we got a lot of, pretty much, probably 80% of our travel budget is not used because of that. Also on capital expenditures, also because especially in infrastructure deployment, that didn't happen because we can't travel, we can't ship equipment around the region, so that project didn't happen. So not much impact on revenue, cost is reduced. Also the impact to the APNIC staff itself, luckily is not significant. We have always been able to operate in remotely, most staff, and so this during the peak of the pandemic, we managed to get 100% of our staff working from home, and then as things get better, we are now at a 50% capacity, allowing people to come over up to a 50% of the capacity of the office. And now we are even going to be make it easier for staff to just come, and only the only restriction that we have now is just maintain a 1.5 meter distance from each other, and that's where it stands at the moment. So all in all, we're not too much impacted. The members are also not impacted, but we help defer payment for those who need it. So that's an update on the COVID-19 impact in our region. So that's my update. Thank you very much for the time, and happy to receive any questions or email or online. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for inviting us to give this update with the main highlights of at LACNIC during this 2020. I'm going to start with the LACNIC services and the attention to our regional community, I think that the most relevant highlight in LACNIC during this 2020 was the IPv4 exhaustion. During August, we finished our pool of IPv4 addresses for the first time in LACNIC history. We were not able to attend a specific request for IPv4 space. So that was during this year. As you can see, during that time, we received we doubled the number of requests that we usually receive in the services area. That was almost at the same time we implemented transfers, inter-RIR transfers. And if you can see this little red bar, that's the number of transfer requests for transfers that we received since we implemented the inter-RIR transfers with the other 3 of the registries that allow this kind of services. One relevant element of our service is to address the customer needs. So we conduct a customer satisfaction survey every 2 years to identify those needs and to know how we are conducting our services, how is perceived this satisfaction by our but by all of our customers. So during 2020, we received the highest level of satisfaction, customer satisfaction, with 98% of the top 2 boxes responses. That's the highest level in LACNIC history. But also the best answer grew from 68% to 81%, which is the highly satisfied answer. Following with our community, the statutory electoral processes, we conduct 3 different statutory electoral processes every year. 2 for commissions, the Fiscal Commission and the Electoral Commission, and 1 for the LACNIC board. We had the same turnout for the 3 elections with 12%, and that is a little bit less than the highest point, not a little bit, almost a half of the 20%, which was the highest point in 2018. There were 5 seats filled in these elections. And as you know, we were the first RIR event to move into a virtual one, and we had only 5 weeks to come up with this format. We had around 1,000 participants in each event. Although physical attendance are not comparable with virtual participants. Something worth to mention is that we were able to organize these 2 events with this level of satisfaction. As you can see, we had a 93% and 98% of satisfaction in each of the events. And that was not by accident, but mainly for the strong community we have built in all these years. I mean, the previous work we have done with the community, and also the ability to react to this situation. But I think that we need to get back soon to physical events to keep this permanent building process. Last year, we update our community code of conduct, and we introduced the concept of trusted representatives. They are staff and community members designated by the LACNIC board, and the role is to provide support to the community as well as information regarding this code of conduct. Also, one of our main efforts were conducted through the online training, which is the LACNIC campus. We have a very good offer of training courses in different topics, mostly technical topics related with our activities. But last year we introduced the IPv6 in massive networks and introduction to internet governance. Also, last year we published the introduction of our internet routing registry, taking advantage of the authoritative information that we have at the registry. By mid-year in June, we realized that we had a very low execution of expenses, nearly 60%. So we presented 60 initiatives from different topics, but most of them related to our customers, 80% of them related to our customers and our community, to try to reduce this lack of execution. So by the end of the year, we were able to do most of what we had to do with the little affectation to our community. Finally, last but not least, historically, we have been paying a lot of attention to the workplace. This year, with even more energy trying to alleviate the additional stress by the pandemic, we received 2 awards from 2019 evaluation. And this year, 2020, we conducted the employee assessment and we maintained the positive feedback of 93%. And that assessment was done during the most part of the pandemic, which is October. So it appears that some of our efforts seem to have been effective with this situation. So that was our update. Thank you for your attention.
I'm Hans-Petter Holen, the Managing Director of the RIPE NCC. Compliance is high on our agenda in 2021. In order to maintain an accurate registry, we need to do proper due diligence on updates. As this can be time consuming, we have streamlined our processes where authenticity can easily be verified, so that we can spend our resources on updates that are not that straightforward. We firmly believe that political sanctions should not affect our services. The Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs is of the opinion, however, that IP address transfers is covered by the EU sanctions. We have established more elaborate checks of our members and their controlling parties. To do this, we're using a third-party service to identify potentially sanctioned members. After further investigation, which might require requesting more elaborate documentation from the members, the decision on what action to take is made by an internal sanctions committee. We have a large amount of IPv6 addresses available, and there is a waiting list for the bits and pieces of v4 that is still there. You may have already seen our announcement to retire the RPKI validator on 1st of July this year. This is partly because there are several good alternatives, but also to focus our resources on the core RPKI service. With the introduction of RPKI to secure the internet routing system, we have become an integral part of the operations of the internet. As a result of this, we're seeing an increased focus on documented compliance from our members and on the community at large. Not only for the registry, but also for the RPKI service. We're currently building a control framework with the goal to have a third-party attestation report publicly available. From the very beginning, a key element is building and operating the internet has been knowledge sharing. I'm quite proud of the work done by my colleagues in developing the RIPE NCC Certified Professionals Program. As a result of the pandemic, we have adapted all our in-person training courses to webinars, and we still have managed to update the e-learning courses in the RIPE NCC Academy. RARs are all about the numbers, but with the numbers comes the reverse lookup in enadder.arpa, and here we have added new sites to improve the service. RIPE Atlas software probes are now available on several platforms, and for RIPE Stats, we're moving parts of the service to the cloud and have improved monitoring of the service. The BGP Play also have some new features. Right now, we're creating a new coordination team for security, risk, and compliance. The goal here is to align the company-wide risk framework, RPKI compliance, and registry compliance and IT security. The overall goal is to increase trust through increased security and compliance, but we also need to verify this by external audits. We have several open positions in this area, from security engineers to as Chief Information Security Officer. Last but not least, we're improving the usability of our services. Academy got a new look in the beginning of last year. RIPE Stats and RIPE Atlas have a new user experience, and soon RIPE Labs will be on a new look and feel. Finally, I would like to welcome you all to RIPE 82 in a month's time, this year starting on the Norwegian Constitution Day, May 17th. Welcome. With that, thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Kim Davies, and this is an update on the INA functions for the past year. The INA functions involve the global coordination of the unique identifiers that are needed for interoperability on the internet. We typically divide these functions into 3 areas. One of these 3 areas is number resources, comprised of the IP addresses and autonomous system numbers that are managed by the RIRs. We allocate large blocks of these addresses for the RIRs, who then provide them to local network operators in accordance with their regional policies. Our most recent allocation to ARIN was in late 2019 and was composed of a /12 block of IPv6 unicast address space. In addition to allocations, we service the inadder.arpa and IP6.arpa DNS zones and coordinate with RIRs the appropriate delegations to ensure reverse DNS services. We also offer a number of support services for these core activities. One of them I'd like to highlight today is a dashboard that allows you to drill down into allocation trends that inform how IANA allocates resources. This is something that we've built with feedback from the RIRs and provides greater transparency into the allocation methodology employed in the global policies. You can find this dashboard on our website. Also on our website, you can find performance reporting relating to the number resource functions, as well as other IANA functions. There, you will find monthly reporting for each of our functional areas. And in the case of root zone management, we also offer a real-time dashboard. In addition to this performance reporting, the RIR community performs an annual review of the IANA functions. I'm pleased to report the recently released annual review, which covers 2020, found no issues of concern. We also have an annual third-party audit conducted according to the SOC 2 framework. These findings are provided to our RIR partners. More generally, we recently conducted an annual survey of our customers. We're delighted to share that we've received our highest marks to date for customer satisfaction. This was underscored by findings just last month, where we had 100% customer satisfaction across all of our customer segments. This is a first for us. Operationally, we've been fortunate. We've not been significantly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Our team started working from home in late February of 2020. And since then, we've continued to meet our performance targets in all of our service areas. This gives us confidence in our ability to successfully deliver the IANA functions in future disaster recovery scenarios. One specific area where we had to significantly modify operations is our root zone KSK ceremonies. We conduct these ceremonies to administer the trust anchor for the DNS in an open and transparent way. The unique design of our approach is intended to foster trust in the integrity of the cryptography used to secure the DNS. This is in contrast to the secrecy used in comparable key management for other applications. We typically hold these events every 3 months, and they involve participants from around the world. Some of these participants are from the RIR community. The pandemic has meant that we have had to significantly alter our approach. We continue to hold these ceremonies with increased remote participation and compensating controls to ensure security is not diminished. We're hopeful that these ceremonies can resume in their normal approach later this year. As we continue to adapt and evolve our operations, not only in the face of the pandemic, but in response to evolution that is happening throughout our communities, we would love to hear your feedback on areas where we can enhance our effectiveness. We welcome our ideas on how we can improve our participation in community events after the recent pause in activity caused by the various travel restrictions. Thank you for listening.
And with that, we let you know that if there are questions, some of our, oops, let me stop sharing that. Some of our attendees are here, but I'll let Mr. Curran make decisions as what we're doing next.
Yes, obviously, if there's questions on that, please send them to the info address. And at this time, we're going to go into break. We're going to delay our break 15 minutes. So we're breaking now. We will resume at 2:15 Eastern time. So I ask that people Be back promptly at 2:15. Please recognize that we have some activities during the break, which we're now going to tell you about. So if you want to stick around during the break. Otherwise, we'll see you back here at 2:15. That's a 15-minute delay from the published program.
Stick around for a stretch with ARIN and a word scramble challenge. We'll take a few minutes to let everybody stretch their legs or stand up or take needed breaks, and we'll come back for a stretch with ARIN.
Welcome back for day 2 of our stretch session. Welcome back for day 2 of our stretch session. I'm ARIN. I'll be guiding us through another 10-minute stretch today. Hope you're enjoying the meeting so far and having a great time. So we'll dive right in. Again, if this is your first stretch session with me, find a comfortable seat. You can do this seated in a chair. You can do a lot of this standing up if you feel like you need to get up and stretch, or you can also find a seat on the ground if that's more comfortable for you. So take a moment, get comfortable. You can do this in whatever you're wearing right now. And we'll just start by connecting with our breath, placing your hands down on your knees or just above them, relaxing the shoulders away from the neck, creating some space, sitting up with a nice straight spine. And just allow that breath to flow. Breathing naturally at first. You can close your eyes if you wish. And with each breath, just slowly beginning to deepen the breath, slowing down the inhale as you feel the body and the belly expand with oxygen. And exhaling slowly through the mouth. Feel the body coming back in towards itself, relaxing and releasing anything that needs to be let go of. Repeating this at your own pace, a couple of breaths. Beginning to just quiet the mind and dropping into the present moment. And whenever you're ready, we'll open those eyes. And we're going to turn our head over to the right side and just taking that right hand just along the cheek or the chin and just gently beginning to guide that head to the side as far as you can. You can also place that opposite hand on your shoulder and again, just creating space through the side neck, through the face. Relaxing the neck muscles, releasing them. Turning as far behind you as is comfortable. And slowly coming through center. We'll repeat that on the opposite side, just gently holding onto that cheek or the chin and guiding it as you turn the head as far as is comfortable. Deep breath in and exhale, releasing. We'll drop that chin down to the chest and just rock the head slowly and gently side to side. And coming back through center. We'll bring that left arm right across the body and using that opposite arm, just kind of creating a little bit of a T shape here, stretching that shoulder muscle. Continuing to sit up nice and tall, feeling a lengthening along that shoulder and the upper arm, bicep. Keeping both hands kind of open here, active, engaging the muscles. And releasing. And preparing for that opposite side now, creating a T with those arms, active fingers, a nice stretch along that right shoulder. Deep breath in and release. We're going to bring both hands behind our back and clasp them together. So your hands are going to look like this in a fist behind your back. We're going to take both hands over as far to the right as you can manage. So if you're really tight along the muscles on your neck and shoulders, you might really just be sitting with your hands right behind your back, and that's okay. But starting to guide those hands slowly, taking time over to the right side of the body. Now your fists might be kind of next to your torso here, and you're really going to feel a pull along that left arm. And it should be a nice stretch here wherever you are, wherever is comfortable for you. If you want to add a little bit into it, you can start dropping that right ear over to the right shoulder. You're going to feel an even deeper stretch as you do so. So really feeling a lot of traction along that left shoulder, left neck, the upper back. 2 breaths. And releasing. And we're going to bring those hands over as far as we can to the left side now. So again, take your time here. Just let your body adjust, not rushing into it. And with each breath, you might find that you can go a little bit further. And if you'd like to add a little bit more here, you can drop that ear over to the shoulder. Couple of breaths. And coming back through center, releasing those arms. And from here, we're going to take both arms up towards the ceiling. You're going to hold on to that right wrist with the left hand and start opening up that side body. So just kind of guiding that right arm up and over. You don't want to collapse in on yourself here. So really maintaining a straight spine and open chest and heart as you open up the side body. With each breath, just deepening that stretch a little bit more. And inhaling back through center, drop the arms, relaxing them down just for a moment. And we'll swoop them back up to the sky, this time holding onto that opposite wrist, your left hand, your left wrist with the right hand. Deep breath in, straight spine, and then opening up that left side body. And returning back through center, relax the arms down. And you can shake those shoulders out, maybe just kind of moving them up, back and down, shrugging the shoulders a bit, allowing the neck to drop side to side. We've done a lot of work on the neck and shoulders here. From here, we're going to start to take our twist, allowing that spine to get a nice adjustment. So holding on to the opposite knee, you can choose whichever side you'd like. I'm going to start with my right side, so bringing that left hand over to my right knee, beginning to turn. Maintaining an open spine and open chest as I hold on to the back of the chair and gaze behind me. And coming back through center, then opening up to that opposite side. And returning back through center. From here, I'm going to scooch to the edge of my chair and start to straighten out my legs. Depending on where you are, this may be possible. If you'd like to move to the floor, that's also a good option. We're going to do sort of a seated forward fold here, but in our chair. So making sure you have a nice firm base and you're stable on the chair. There's no wheels on it. If it does have wheels, make sure you're up against a wall or maybe move down to the floor. We're going to start to bend from our hips. So kind of bending forward from the hips, not arching the back too much. You want to really protect that spine, maybe placing your hands on your hips to help guide, just bending forward. And you'll feel a stopping point. You're going to start to feel those muscles in your legs really releasing. You can bend your knees a little bit if that helps you get a little bit deeper into the stretch. As you start bending forward, drop the head down into sort of a seated forward fold. Bringing that forehead down to the knees. You can relax your hands down on the floor or some part of your legs and just release, breathing into this deep forward fold. Loosening up the tight hamstrings and calf muscles in the legs. And very slowly, we'll begin to rise up, one vertebrae at a time to prevent any dizziness. And bring those knees back in, adjusting yourself. And we'll hold on to those knees now for a seated cat and cow. So for seated cat and cow, placing those knees down on the ground, hold on to those feet down on the ground, hold on to those knees for support. As we breathe in, we're going to push our belly out. and kind of flex the back. So creating that kind of reverse C with the back and gazing up towards the sky. As you exhale, we're going to round the spine, tuck the chin, really bringing that belly in, creating a C shape again with that front body. And inhaling forward, gaze up. And exhale, round the spine, tuck the chin. And coming back through neutral. I'm going to sweep our arms back up to the sky. And exhale, dropping just that left arm. We're going to bend at the elbow, right here, and kind of placing the back of the hand right along the shoulder blades. You're going to bring that right arm up and over, bending at the elbow. Now your hands may not touch, and that's perfectly okay, but you're going to feel a great stretch along that upper back, along the shoulders, and maybe, just maybe, your fingertips will find one another, and maybe not. Breathing in for a moment, gently releasing those arms, and bringing both arms back up to the sky. We're going to bend that left elbow this time and bring that right elbow bent behind us. Once again, I'll turn around so you can see my hands are trying to find one another. But that's not the goal. You're really just stretching those upper shoulder muscles, the upper back. Also your biceps. And relax the arms down. Place your hands on your knees, maybe rubbing your thighs a couple times. And taking a couple more deep breaths in as we close our stretching session for the day. One more deep breath in as we bring our arms up overhead. Exhale, hands coming to center. Thanks for joining me for day 2 of stretching. Hope you enjoy the games we have planned for you next, and we will see you tomorrow for another stretch.
Welcome everybody that is using their break to get their brains moving to our word scramble. This one will happen a little different than the trivia yesterday, but it's a pretty simple game. Basically, we have about 12 words that are all related to either the meeting, to ARIN policy meetings, to ARIN in general, things like that. And we will put the word up on the screen, and all you have to do is try to unscramble it in chat. When you've figured out what the word is, you can chime in chat and let us know what you think it is. And then once we have a general consensus, we'll reveal what the actual word is. At the end, based on those who have participated in chat, not those who have gotten the most right, we will award a gift card of Grubhub or DoorDash, or if you're one of our international friends, a Visa gift card. So is everybody ready to play? All right. Here is your first word. I'm going to, hopefully the first one will be a little bit easier. Oh, I see people messing it up. All right, here we go. What is this word? Look at Mr. Sawyer jumping in first. All right, we made that first one a little easier than the rest, but it appears the majority of the group has figured out that it is internet. Good job. All right, I'm going to make it a little more challenging this next time. Let's see. Try this long word. Not only is it long to look at, but long to type. Oh, looks like Mr. Geeson dropped in first. Not that you get awards for first, just for participation. And I see lots of participation there. And that's correct. The word is autonomous. Good job. Oh, mountainous. Mr. Wilder, I saw that same, almost. One more M. Oh, actually, no, yeah, anyway. All right, try this one. This one stumped me, so I'll see what it does for you guys. Mr. Huberman jumping in. Then it's hard to ignore other people's. He had that one fast. That's right. This answer is registration. That was way faster than I would have gotten it. All right, let's try this next one. A tricky one. Oh, Alicia Johnson, Miss Trotman is right there. That's right, this 15-member body does lots of advising. It is the advisory. I didn't make it 2 words, it would have given it away. Yes, lots of AC members chimed in on that one. All right, that's good. If they hadn't chimed in, we'd been worried, right? Oh, and former registration services, there you go. All right, give this one a try. Get those brains going. Ooh, we have some newer winners this time. Oh, I like the user test. I'm going to give you credit for that. It was trustees, but I like test user and user test. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I love when you think outside the box. I don't know that there is a box to think outside of, but it's a start. Very nice. Very nice. Yes, it was trustees or test user or user test. He said user test, and I believe Owen DeLong said test user. So all true. All right, try this one. Our whole afternoon. That's right, Mr. Provo. Policy, 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 policy. That's why I got to get your brains woke up. Very nice. All right. It was policy. Let's try this one. Oh, look at that. We've got 3 in. They figured it out. For Saturn. Now, Mr. DeLong thinks that it's a challenge to come up with something other than what I must have meant, right? All right, you're right. It's transfer. Well done, Fastern. All right. This sounds like something you need to pick up like when you have a cold. Just kidding, it's related to ARIN. Man, Omo, I'm going to brutalize your last name and I apologize, but you have been first in for the last 3 times. Community is correct. All right. I ordered this with my sushi last night. Oshi. Or who is? Good job, everybody. See, this one I actually got because it was only a couple of letters. Those long ones, I get stuck. Let's see, this one's a little bit out of the line. I'm looking for 8 people to chime in on this one. 8 specific people. There it is. That's right. We have 8 fellows this time around. And the coordinator for the fellowship program added a smiley at the end. Try this one. We're almost to the end. Well done, Mr. Wilder. That was very fast. You are correct. It is routing. And I wish there was a P. It would be pencil set, but it's not. Try this one. There's a lot of question in this one. Oh, I deleted the last thing. It was selection. Oh my gosh. But I like license too, if that actually works. That's pretty impressive. Actually, the actual word was elections, but ironically, selection also works. And they all worked. And I'm gonna look real quick and see if I have, I need someone that is on, let's see.
I can pick a number.
Oh, thank you. Miss Kara, can you pick a number between 1 and it appears to be about, let's see, 38.
Between 1 and 38, let's go for 26.
That is Mr. Paul Emmons, EMMOSONS. Congratulations, you are winning a $25 gift card. And we will be in contact to award that. Thanks everybody for playing with me. That was fun. And I will
Beverly,
pause.
good job as
You're
always.
welcome. And I will pass it back over to our slide control.
Okay. That was entertaining. I note that we are now back. It is a little late, but we're going to move ahead with our policy. The first one up is draft policy ARIN 2020-10, removal of the requirement to demonstrate utilization of reassignments and reallocations for ISPs seeking initial allocation from ARIN. Amy Potter is the shepherd for the AC and will be presenting the proposal. Amy, take it away.
All right, so 2020-10 is a policy proposal that deals with initial allocations to ISPs. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay, so what's important to remember here is that we're talking about ISPs that are receiving their very first batch of space directly from ARIN. These organizations can fall into two different groups. They can either already have some space that's been reassigned to them from an upstream provider, or they could just have no space at all. And currently, Section 422 treats these two groups differently. So organizations that already have a reallocation or a reassignment from an upstream provider have to show efficient utilization of that space in order to qualify to receive space directly from ARIN. If you are an organization that doesn't have any space from an upstream provider, then you do not have to show previous utilization of anything because you don't have any space already to be utilizing. Next slide, please. So this policy proposal came out of a policy experience report. There are some organizations that felt like the different burdens being applied to these two types of organizations was unfair. So remember, ARIN doesn't have this free pool to give out anymore. They have the waitlist space. And the organizations that already hold space from an upstream provider have to go through the extra hurdle of providing documentation to ARIN to show that they have efficiently utilized that space. The extra time that it takes to put all of that together and submit it means that they would get onto the wait list, you know, a little bit later than another organization that didn't have space already, that didn't have to go through that. And there was the thought that this might provide an unfair advantage to new companies that don't have space yet. Next slide. So there you go. So the proposed text here, you can read on the slide. It's basically does away with those distinctions, and organizations that already have space from an upstream provider under this proposal would no longer need to show efficient utilization of that space prior to applying for space directly from ARIN. Next slide, please. So what we would like to hear some feedback from all of you today on is whether or not you feel that the current text is unfair. Is this a problem that we really need to resolve? And if we did implement the proposed changes here, would there be any unexpected issues that might pop up? So would love to hear your feedback.
I will try and pop up here. I think I popped up, but hello, Amy. Good. Are you filling in for Owen again? Is that how this works?
No, I am not.
Good to see you. So yes, per Amy's comments, the virtual microphones are now open. And today, it would be great if people use the raised hand as well as the Q&A section. The Q&A is great, but sometimes it is good to get a little bit interactive and hear some. So do encourage you to also make use of the raised hand if you'd like to open your mic and let the community hear from you. So again, this is just a draft policy. So feedback on whether or not you support the problem statement to be solved. You don't have to love the solution right now, but whether the AC should continue to work on this as a problem, and any feedback to the current text question. So we will give it a moment, and I see we actually have some hands up. So let's go to our first hand, Owen DeLong. Please name and affiliation once you're unmuted.
Owen, I'm going to allow you to talk now.
Owen, you're on the air.
Now.
I can hear you now.
Owen DeLong, ARIN Advisory Council, DeLong Consulting. I think that this is a good and useful change to the policy. I'm not convinced the current text is unfair. I'm not convinced it's a problem we need to solve, but I think it's a problem we should solve. And so I support it moving forward.
Thank you, Owen. We'll go to our Q&A next.
All right, we have Marcia with the Obsidian Group. What is efficient utilization? Is it defined as to what is adequate for efficient utilization?
Amy, did you want to address Marcia's question, or did you want to let staff answer that?
I think I'll let staff answer that. We can probably give a more precise reference to NERPM.
It is referenced to the NERPM, and I would try and reference it myself, but I learned a long time ago why take a guess when I can make John do it.
Yeah, I can do that. So there is a reference in NERPM. I'm actually going to pull it up myself to make sure I get this right, because we'd rather not get something like this wrong. So efficient utilization, currently ISPs are required to provide utilization efficiency criteria in providing address space to their customers. They have to document justification for each reassignment. We can request this at any time. So that's the definition in the current text, okay? And it basically says, when we go to request space, when an ISP asks for space, we will take their reassignments and we'll consider them if they can show that they allocated them to their customers. If they can't, then we don't consider that space utilized, okay? So they're supposed to make the same allocations that ARIN would make to an end user customer. When they make allocations, we can ask them for a copy of that documentation.
Okay. Hopefully, Marcia, that answers your question. So thank you. We'll move on to our next in-person speaker, Lee Howard. Name and affiliation after staff opens the queue here for you.
All right, Lee, you can unmute yourself.
Yes,
Hi,
a reminder. Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Hi, Lee, go ahead.
Lee Howard from IPv4.global by Hilco Stream Bank. Looking at the text as currently drafted, it seems to me there's going to be some impact with the previous section in the policy manual also. 4.2.1 talks about slow start and minimum allocation. So, and my instant response was, what about the slow start model? And the policy says, if you need less than a /24, then get it from your upstream provider. Anybody who's multi-homed, I believe multi-homing is already considered justification for a /24. So what we're talking about is an ISP that doesn't qualify for a /24 based on number of users and doesn't qualify for a /24 based on multi-homing would be the only case where there isn't already a policy that covers them. So I think we would definitely, I haven't decided yet whether this change to the definition of slow start and its interaction with the other policies means what. I haven't decided yet whether I will support it or oppose it on that basis, but I think there's going to be, because there's going to be more analysis needed.
Is it the problem that you're not sure if you can support, or the proposed text, out of curiosity?
So I think that understanding, maybe it's understanding the scale of the problem, because there are a couple of different ways to do this, and the definition of an ISP as someone who does reassignments or reallocations, who has less than a /24, is a pretty small ISP. I mean, if you only have a /26 and you need allocation so you can swip /29s, that's a pretty small set from as far as I can see.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Amy? Or?
Nope, we will take that into consideration.
Thank you for the feedback, Lee. Good to hear from you. Also, I'll note that Mercedes does note that we did answer her question utilization, and Mercedes, my apologies on the name mispronunciation. I will do better in the future. We are slowly running out of queues here. I see Lee's hand is still up. Is that just laggard, or Lee does okay, or does he? I was just going to give him an opportunity if there was items that he wanted to go on. So We're going to be closing the queue shortly, not because we're running out of time, but we're running out of items. So please put your hand up if you'd like to speak. And in the Q&A, maybe we can try something a bit different because I always hated I cut it off a second too early. If you've got something to type, maybe just say typing, put a quick question in so we know to wait for your more fulsome question. If you can just give us a one word, that you have something coming. Let's go to our next Q&A.
All right, we have Allison Wood with the state of Oregon, also with ARIN AC. What is the average delay for ISPs that do have holdings?
John Sweeting, would you be able to address that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no average delay. There's differing delays. If they have to put together the spreadsheet that shows the utilization that they have for each of the blocks, if they have a 22, it might take them a little longer. It's really just the back and forth of the ticket. They come in, we have to go back and ask them for it. Then they come back with their answer. If it's good, then we're good from there. If not, we have to go back and ask them again. So the delay, it's variable. There's no real average. It could be anywhere from 3 days to 10 days, depending on how quickly they get the responses turned around and back into us.
Thank you for that, John Swing. We have one more person in queue, and then I guess we will close off. So this is your last call to raise your hand or put a question in. Can we please go to Sai Mattapalli, I believe. Please state your name and affiliation, and staff, if you can unmute.
Sai, you
Yes.
can unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead with your question or comment.
The ISP for a static IP and dynamic IP, how you are included in the draft policy, if it is caching during the static to dynamic IP conversion, is there involved in this? It could be a problem.
So that's generally a level that policy does not delve into, other than if it was an ISP, for instance, who had dynamic IP pools, they would have to provide information in their application when they're trying to show their utilization. And they would state, if I recall correctly, and John Sweeting might be able to give me more specifics, but you would give how big a pool you've allocated to regions, and that would be used to calculate utilization. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your question. John, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for your question. Okay, I see that Mercedes has another question. So why don't we go to that, and then we'll close off.
All right, Mercedes Arnold with the Obsidian Group. Does this policy anticipate a shift to virtual machines and cloud services by end users?
So this,
Go ahead,
go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, okay. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say this policy doesn't really get into that. It's something sort of came about, I think, towards the beginning of the pandemic. I don't think that it really addresses that specifically. Paul, I don't know if you have something else you want to say about that.
No, I don't think it. I think the shift to virtual machines and cloud services is just another factor of utilization, which we've generally not gotten too specific in. But I don't know if either of the staff Johns want to correct me on that, since they're the.
Hey Paul, I just want to add that it could have something to do with that, the cloud services, because of the whole bring your own IP programs that several of the cloud providers provide, which would of course incentivize the end users to get their own /24 to use it in that scenario.
Okay, we're getting the Brady Bunch going here. I see John Kern has popped up. So John.
Yeah. Obviously we're seeing a shift, but I don't think this policy doesn't aim to address that shift. And this policy is one way or another, the question of how you account for virtual machines and hosting, cloud hosting, is orthogonal to the question this policy asks, which is regarding documentation for sub-allocations. So I think it's an interesting point, something that the community should be thinking about is in today's age, if you go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, ISPs allocated IP addresses to end users, and that was a fairly permanent thing unless an end user left for another customer. Nowadays, we have ISPs who are running virtual infrastructure for customers. We have end user computing companies running infrastructure. It looks very similar. And so I think that this it's a great question about long-term, how the community wants to handle it. We are seeing convergence among what was ISP and end users in their utilization, particularly ones that are service providers of any type. But this policy, one way or another, doesn't directly address it, nor does it. I don't think it's relevant directly to the consideration of this proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to close the microphones now and go to our last queue, the person that got in hand, and then we will move on to the next policy. So if staff can let Kevin Bloomberg of The Wire.
All right, Kevin, you can unmute.
Good afternoon, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Amy, does this policy take into account the open consultation right now where end users are effectively put into the same sort of policy framework as internet providers? That's sort of part one of the question. I think if your answer is yes or no, the next question becomes, is this policy premature? Based on what Lee said earlier, I get the impression that there's a lot of edge cases. This is really dealing with free pool / waitlist, and not dealing with what's in the transfer market. And maybe this is maybe this policy needs to be looked at more holistically as when can an organization come to the waitlist for their initial allocation versus going to the transfer market. This is maybe trying to solve one very, very specific problem, but leaving out the real question that should be asked.
So I'm going to take the first question, if that's okay. I mean, I'll let you ponder the second one. The first one is it's the fee schedule change for end users, at least, that you referred to. And there's obviously more than that as part of the fee consultation, is really just about an amount being billed for address space being held. It really doesn't get into the policy on how ARIN determines a needs for an end user. So unless John is going to correct me, which I could be wrong, the policy, in theory, I guess the point is if there is an interpretation that this policy would impact it, I think the board would be then sending it back for clarification, because that, fee should not be impacted by policy. I know that, the only exception has been that sometimes the minimum allocation size has been opened up because people want to get access to lower fees, which is kind of more of an end run around the fee bit. But from how much people get charged, if anything, we're now eliminating the differentiation on that. John, I saw you pop up, so you might want to clarify.
Paul, so I know I agree that the fee question should be kept totally separate, but what Kevin asked is a valid question. Kevin's question is this policy, which is addressing—
There's two parts. You're going to the second part now, or?
The second part, I guess, is what I would go.
Okay,
I just
good.
want to comment.
And
you're letting Amy off the hook. You're letting Amy off the hook then.
To clarify on the first part, it's not about the fees that I'm talking about. It's in reference to the fact that there is now no longer potentially a distinction between ISP and end user, where we have that in policy today because of what was in the fee side of it. But I'm not talking specifically about the fees themselves, but the fact that now there is no differentiation between ISP and end user.
Well, there's no differentiation in the fee table, but there's still end users from that standpoint. John?
Kevin, the policy is the policy. If the policy has end users and ISPs, then we still implement end users and ISPs. Okay, it is the fees are about making sure, regardless of the size of your holdings, you pay a proportional rate just like everyone else. Okay, so it doesn't eliminate end user and ISPs if the policy continues to try to distinguish those categories. So I don't think that optimizing or changing the policies that are applicable to ISPs. I would say there's a bigger meta issue, which is we have 2 decades worth of policy based on incremental dribble allocation and coming back for your next block, most of which for V4 is no longer relevant. And it might be good for the AC to take a fresh looking backwards at saying, what is the minimum policy necessary? But that's a much bigger task. As long as we have these sections of policy, the AC should continue to consider proposals to do upkeep on individual sections.
And certainly, since the terms ISP and end user are rooted in 20 years of history or more, I think at this point, right, John? The fee a bit, and it is a bit tangential, but it is raised. I think lets us be more flexible to the fact that the way the industry has evolved is quite much more flexible. Amy, is there anything you'd like to add to Kevin's question?
No, happy to chat later with you, Kevin.
Kevin, I apologize. We didn't mean to monopolize your bit there. So thank you, Kevin, for your comment and question. Thank you for the community for their feedback. Thank you, Amy, for the presentation. She's gave you a double hitter this conference, so good to see you again. This being a draft policy, this feedback is now forwarded to the AC, and we will move on to the next policy. John, over to you.
Very good. So I'd like to say we have the next policy coming up is draft policy ARIN 2020-11, add a textual description for number resource hierarchy image in section 2. Andrew Dull will be the presenter. So I'll turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm here today to talk about a text change around the definitions section in section 2 of the number policy resource manual. Next slide, please. Here's a brief history of this. This came to us late last year, and it's gone through a couple of revisions so far in the text. Next slide, please. Here's the problem statement as it came to us. The main issue that was raised by a community member was that there's a graphic in our policy manual that does not have alt text or any other description of it. So if someone had a disability, site-related disability, or perhaps in the event that the NRPM was translated, this could cause issues as information would be lost. So we were asked to take a look at that. Next slide, please. This is the definition and the graphic as it exists today in the NRPM. It's just a very simple one sentence which says responsibility for management of address space is distributed globally in accordance with the hierarchical structure shown below. And then that's the graphic that exists today in the NRPM. Next slide, please. These are the definitions that currently exist that are related to the graphic that is in the NRPM today for reference. Next slide, please. All right, so the issues as were brought to us. So the original proposal suggested that we replace the image. However, we believe the image is useful as it does kind of very quickly describe the relationship between the different entities. So the AC suggested to leave the image in and just add some text in addition to it. As feedback from PPML, a number of members noted that the term ISP is in this graphic and that it is perhaps better use the term LIR, which is local internet registry, to better align with the rest of the policy manual, and also to, as part of our cleanup, to remove the overloaded term ISP from the manual. Next slide, please. All right, so the final questions for the day are, does the addition of the text add value to the NRPM? Does the update from the ISP to LIR clarify the text? Do you think there's any additional text that needs discussion? And are there any other issues raised by this update that which needs to be considered? So I don't see there was missing a slide, I thought. Well, I guess the slide is missing out of the deck. So anyway, there was a slide that I thought showed the actual text as we intended, but it looks like that got left off the deck. Anyway, we're open for your comments and questions about this. The updated text has been posted to PPML, so it is there for sure.
If we could get the discussion question slide up, that's, I find, always helpful to refresh since, thank you
That's
for that
the
answer.
second to last slide.
There we are. And we will open up our queues again for discussion. We have got some good time available. So if you have a comment or question, please go into the Q&A or raise your hand. And I see we have our first question, so let's go to that. Oh, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
All right, Chris Woodfield with Twitter. This proposal should be uncontroversial and clarifies the text. It could be argued that this is editorial. Was that discussed and dismissed at any point?
Andrew, was that discussed?
So it is discussed, and actually our plan is to make this editorial. We wanted to bring this to the community after the discussion of LSP, ISP, and LIR to clarify that that is indeed the community's direction. So the direction we do intend to take is to make this editorial from this point going forward, assuming there are no issues raised in today's discussion.
Let's go to our raised hands. Let's go to Sai first, please.
All right, Sai, you can unmute yourself now.
And name, affiliation, please, always.
Yeah, my name is Saidlu Matapalli. I'm from Matapalli Technologies. Actually, my question is that internet service provider to local internet registry, right? This is means suppose if I am chatting in Facebook and Twitter, think about two examples. So I have a link about matapalli.com. So when I paste in the chat box, sometime it will come with some HTML with the included images download automatically, but in the Twitter chat, they will not accept only text. So these kind of difference between the social media platform, other companies, as their regulation in this policy.
So I have to ask you to keep your question or comment on the policy, and the policy, as I understand it, is just whether or not, you know, the image, we're just talking about the text, the image that's in the current manual and whether or not it should be replaced or not. So could you comment on that? If you have some other questions, we can deal with them offline in our breakout rooms.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Let's go to our Q&A.
All right, we have a question from Scott Morazot with the IRS. I support making the guide accessible, even if it's just a single image without alt text. The text seems fine.
Thank you.
Let's go to our next hand up here. Donnie Lewis.
All right, Donnie, I'm allowing you to unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Donnie, and name and affiliation, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
There we are. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Donnie Lewis. I'm from the Obsidian Group Incorporated. And just from looking at the image and the text, to me, it seems clear enough. And as far as changing the letter ISP to LIR, the last thing we need to have is more acronyms. I think the ISP and what it implies is clear. So I don't see why changing ISP to LIR would make things less clear, except adding yet another acronym that we will have to keep track of.
So I'll note to you that the acronym LIR is already used throughout the number policy manual and is actually formally defined in our definition section, whereas ISP is not. And so I think actually moving to LIR, even though it is another acronym and maybe one that is not, people aren't as familiar with outside of this community, is probably more accurate, as organizations who act as LIRs at local internet registries are not always internet service providers in the traditional sense of selling internet transit service to someone.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Donnie, or did you have any further follow-up?
I have no further comment on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And are you supportive of the policy?
Yeah, overall, I think the image with the text on it is very clear to me. So everything else I'm okay with.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, and that's the beauty of putting up your hand because we can do some follow-up. Okay, let's go to our 2 Q&A, and after our 2 Q&A are cleared, we are going to close the queue. So please type a quick query if our 3 Q&A now. We'll do the 2, then we'll go to the mic, and then we'll go back to what might be our last comment. If you do want to get in the Q&A, please just type the word Q or something, so we will save your spot and then you can take your time to type. Or put your hand up, but at the end of these 2 comments, we will close off. Let's go ahead with our 2 next comments.
All right, a comment from Nia Brown with Amazon Web Services. I support this policy. Accessibility work like this is important.
Thank you, Nia. And from Joe.
Joe Provo with Google and ARIN AC. Support is written plus editorial.
Okay, we are now closing the queues, and thank you, Gary Geeson, for using the techniques. It proves it works. So let's go to Kevin while our last 2 people type their question. Kevin Bloomberg, go ahead.
All right, Kevin, you're unmuted.
Thank you, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Any policy that can be fast-tracked from a accessibility point of view should absolutely be done. It's as long as the terminology is not being changed, if it's improving accessibility, that should absolutely be a priority, and I agree with that and support this policy from that respect. Regarding the terminology ISP versus LIR, my understanding is the term ISP has been used within the ARIN region for many, many years. It had a very formal sort of description that does not necessarily relate to what many consider an internet service provider today. The term LIR, on the other hand, has been used in many other regions ubiquitously over the years and is probably more accurate today. I don't think how the word ISP was defined 20 years ago and on is necessarily where an ISP is in its terminology and understanding today. So I actually do prefer being consistent both globally in terms of how we use the term LIR, as well as the fact that it is a more generic meaning than ISP. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any follow-up, Andrew, or you take the feedback?
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. All right. We did actually get in a few Q&As, so we will finish off those Q&A and then we will move on to the next policy. So staff, next one, please.
All right, Lee Howard with IPv4.global by Hilco Streambank. I don't think LIR adds clarity when the NERPM uses both terms. Section 4.2 is about ISPs, not LIRs, as currently written.
Okay, thank you, Lee.
So my follow-up to Lee on that item is that the NRPM cleanup working group is working on doing the LIR ISP cleanup. So that is on their to-do list as well to harmonize throughout the document.
Okay. Let's go to Gary's comment next, please.
All right, Gary Geeson with CentralLogic and also the ARIN AC. I support as written. It doesn't change any policy, improves accessibility for those with screen readers, and support use of LIR as it helps harmonize definitions within the NERPM and among the RIRs.
Okay, thank you for that. And just a note that Lee Howard thanks Andrew. He did figure the working group would fix it. So let's get our last Q&A and then we'll finish up this proposal. So Frank, please.
All right, Frank Bulk with FiberNet Communications. I support the policy as communicated.
All right, thank you to all. Last minute one that came in, we'll take it. Let's take Gus's, even though he didn't put the Q in.
All right, Gus with Cogent Communications. I support this policy as written.
Okay, the Q thing did seem to work. So everyone, if we can try and make use of that on our next 2 policies, I'd appreciate it. But this feedback will be provided the AC. Thank you to Andrew Dahl for the presentation, and John, over to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Our next presentation is regarding draft policy ARIN 2021-1, ASN clarifications for sections 2, 8, and 10. Anita Nikolish shall do the presentations. Thank you, Anita.
Okay, so this is an output from the NRPM working group to do some clarifications to some language, which started out, and as they unraveled the thread, it led to more. So I will be going through all of them. Next slide, please. So the Shepherds, myself, and Gary Geeson. This is a very recent proposal from January. The draft policy, obviously, from February, and this is the first time being presented at an ARIN meeting. And again, it came from the AC's NRPM cleanup working group. Next slide. So the problem statement originated with the language in section 8 about ASN only transactions was not clear. While addressing this and looking through sections 2 and 10, there was additional language and reference inconsistencies that also should be adjusted. Next slide. So this is adding a definition for ASN in section 2. You can see ASN, unique identifier, which represents a collection of network resources operated under a common routing policy administration known as an autonomous system. So there is no definition currently. This is to add a definition in section 2. Next slide. And I'll go through these. The second part is the bold is the things that are new. So I just wanted to distinguish between the two. So there's a bunch of these slides kind of grouped under 7 things. So if we replace this on the top, the replacement, the bold is transfer under section 2, just to clarify some wording, in the transfer. Next slide. This is to replace something that says, instead of having that they have acquired, that it has acquired, just to change some semantics and make it clearer. Next slide. Also in section 8.2, again, instead of they have, it has acquired. Next slide. This clarifies in the first sentence under section 8.2 instead of 8.2 IPv4 transfer, again, to make it just very explicit. Next slide. Now we see where under section 8.3, instead of saying IPv4 numbers, we say IPv4 address and or ASN resources. Next slide. Same thing, instead of IPv4 address resources, it is changed to IPv4 address and or ASN resources. Next slide. Clarifying the words a bit, instead of an 8.2 transfer, a transfer under section 8.2. Next slide. In section 8.4, again, instead of IPv4 number resources, addresses and or ASN resources. Next slide. And again, adding and or ASN resources after IPv4. Next slide. Also in section 8.4, replacing number resources with addresses. Next slide. Purely grammatical, a space between section 4.4. Next slide. Section 8.5.6, adding IPv4 space in that sentence. Next slide. Section 8.5.7, we add the requirements in sections 8.5.5 and 8.5.6. Next slide. Adding section 8.5.7, make that a little more clear. Next slide. And in section 10.3, again, adding allocation of ASNs, since that was defined presumably above in section 2, take out the autonomous system numbers and just replace it with the acronym ASNs. Next slide. So some notes posted to PPML March 9th. Only got one comment on this. No concerns have been raised on the list. Next slide. So questions, do the clarifications make sense? And next slide.
So we'll open the microphone. So thank you, Anita, for this and the AC's work on it. A lot of changes, and I would suggest that any comment related to the proposal is welcome, but it may be useful if you have small edits or suggestions that may be better to the PPML or the authors, since it's more editorial and more just if we could focus the discussion on the problem statement and if just generally these changes at a high level. But if there is something that's just burning, or especially if a change is fundamentally changing the text, we can obviously raise that. So with that in mind, let's go to our Q&A. Let's go to our first Q&A.
Okay, and I apologize if I bruised your name, but Omo Kintoy from Amazon Web Services. I support this policy.
Okay, and let's go to our first microphone with Kevin.
And
So
Kevin, you should
name
be able to unmute yourself now.
Name and
Thank you.
affiliation, whether or not you support or against the problem statement.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. I support the problem statement. I support almost all of the text. It was a great cleanup, except for section 10. Even a modest and minor change to global policy in section 10 potentially could require clarification as a global policy change. As such, I don't believe that making a change to that section is both going to be timely or necessarily benefit. If it is an editorial change, I would recommend leaving that one part out to allow this to go through faster.
Can I just ask if maybe a good outcome of this is to ask the AC shepherds to reach out to the ASO AC and just run the change through that and get the feedback of the ASO and potentially get that feedback, and that I think would be very useful feedback. Would that be process correct, Kevin or John?
Yeah, that's fine, Paul.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kevin. That's a good raise. You know, if global policy is always fun. I think I saw Kathy Aronson on earlier. She can tell tales of it. Okay, next Q&A, please.
David Farmer, University of Minnesota. Support is written.
Thank you. Let's go to Donnie Lewis then.
Mr. Lewis, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes. I like the cleanup. I definitely.
Donnie, can I just get you to state your name, affiliation, and whether you support against, and then you can, no problem.
All right. Donnie Lewis, the Obsidian Group. I support the changes. It made the document much more readable, and I'm always like more information versus less. So I do support the changes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our next Q&A then.
Next Q&A, Lee Howard, IPv4.global by Hilco Stream Bank. A lot of work must have gone into this. Definitely an improvement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. We'll take that as supportive. Let's go to Chris Tassett. Name, affiliation, please, and whether you're in favor or against.
Mr. Tassett, you should be able to unmute now.
Yes, thank you. Chris Tassett, Tassett Law, ARIN AC. In the work that we've been doing in the NERPM simplification, a lot of these changes you'll see across some of the other sections as well. In terms of the one issue I wanted to address, which is the section 10 issue that Kevin raised, if this is going to hold it up, then I think you know, the AC ought to consider either splitting it out into a separate policy or abandoning it if it's not worth the lift of trying to get harmonization across regions, if that is indeed necessary at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. For that, let's go to our next Q&A and ask people to start approaching mics or again, using the queue trick. So if you can get in queue now, because we are out of hands and we only have 2 more comments. So we will be closing shortly. Please get in queue.
Joe Provo, Google, ARIN AC, NRPM Working Group, primary author. Apologies for the all pure editorial comments. It was initially believed that this could be able to be executed as editorial, but since there was confusion over purely ASN transfers, it worked its way through the policy, support with or without section 10 adjustment.
Thank you for that. As we have no one left with their hands up, we'll close that queue. And please type the word queue if you plan to put something in the Q&A. At the end of this next one, that queue will be closed, and we are going to try and be more firm on that. So go ahead with our next comment.
John O'Brien, University of Pennsylvania. I support this problem statement and am generally supportive of the proposed solutions. Is there an intended distinction between IPv4 address resource and IPv4 space?
That's a great question. Anita, did you have a comment on that, or?
I don't. I want to make sure I give the best answer. So I will. It would be helpful if you want to post it on PPML, so I can make sure I give you a thorough answer. That's not just my opinion at the moment.
Yeah, John, if you wouldn't mind putting that in your PPML or just sending it to the Shepherd directly, if you'd rather just do that way, they would obviously, if there's clarity they've overlooked, they're happy to take that on. Okay, seeing no one else in queue, we will take our last and final comment. So over to Frank Bulk, please.
Frank Bulk, FiberNet and Premier Communications. I support the recommended changes as written. I appreciate and support Kevin and Chris' point about possibly splitting out the global policy in section 10 as to more speedily adopt the other changes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for that policy proposal. Thank you for their presentation, Anita. We are going to move on to our next one. I would just like to say there's a few people for whatever reason that are putting up and down their hand consistently, and we obviously see that. It's causing some confusion here. So if we see it, we're going to assume that the person is not looking to be identified as having some other technical challenge. If you are having a technical challenge, please reach out to staff at info@arin.net. We don't know if it's a Zoom issue or not, but we are seeing the hand go up and down, and we don't know what that means. So we're going to take it as it's a technical issue. Please keep your hand up and remain that way if you require it. John, over to you.
Okay, very good. Making good progress here. Our next policy for consideration is draft policy ARIN 2021-2, special uses IPv4 space out of scope for purposes of determining waitlist eligibility. Matthew Wilder stepping in to cover this, and it's over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to be talking today about ARIN policy 2021-2, which is special use space out of scope for the purpose of determining waitlist eligibility. Next slide. This is the first time that it's come to any ARIN meetings. It was submitted by Rob Seastrom as a policy proposal. Carrie Richards is the co-shepherd, and it's my pleasure to share the policy on behalf of the two of us. So this was submitted on the 15th of January and then elevated to draft policy on the ARIN AC meeting, the 23rd of March, 2021. Next slide. Here's the problem statement. So current policy does not clearly indicate whether special use addresses for critical infrastructure defined in section 4.4, as well as special use addressing for facilitating IPv6 deployment defined in section 4.10 should be considered as part of the /20 equivalent IPv4 space in aggregate, which would make an organization ineligible for the ARIN waitlist defined in section 4.1.8 of NRPM. So these have been evaluated independently in the past. Next slide. The policy statement as proposed is to replace the current sentence in section 4.1.8, which states organizations which hold more than a /20 equivalent of IPv4 space in aggregate are not eligible to apply. And that text will be replaced with the same, but just adding what's in brackets there. So organizations which hold more than a /20 equivalent of IPv4 space in aggregate, exclusive of special use space received under section 4.4 or 4.10, are not eligible to apply. Next slide. So the origin and background of this is that staff and legal assessment 1st of May 2019 for ARIN 2019/16. The staff noted ARIN staff would immediately perform an audit of the current waitlist and remove and inform any organization that holds more than a /20 in IPv4 space, excluding 4.4 and 4.10. So the intent was clear at this point to treat those blocks distinctly although that doesn't exist in policy today. So next slide. So failure to incorporate this nuance into the NRPM or explicitly contradict it has resulted in some confusion. And the recent policy experience report cited 3 occurrences in as many weeks, so 3 weeks, where staff had a difficult time determining whether or not to include those address blocks in the evaluation of the /20. Next slide. And here's a nice quote: "Clarity affords focus." So the benefit of clarity, of course, is that there's no uncertainty as to how this will be treated. So clear policy is good. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for your inaugural AC presentation. My thanks also to Carrie Vassal Richards, who I know was going to give you this presentation, and she does send regrets. Technology has unfortunately got in the way of a technology conference, but my thanks to her and Matthew on this presentation. We look forward to seeing you back online shortly, Carrie. So this is our last proposal before open microphone. If you want to comment on this, you know the drill. Put up your hand or put in the Q&A. This is a draft policy, so feedback on the problem statement is definitely the main focus, but any other feedback is welcome. Given a few more seconds. Oh, all right. I thought I saw. Okay, we have a hand up. Let's go to, I believe it's Marlon.
Should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi,
Marlon,
yes.
can I name affiliation and whether you support or against the policy, please? And go ahead.
Yes, Marlene Martes, Amazon Web Services, and I support this policy.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. We have a Q&A. Let's go to
that. Paul Emmons from Ninja IX. As an internet exchange point operator, we support this change. We have run into this issue recently, having to supply utilization of IX space. I assume that's 1X space in order to get on the wait list for IPv4 space.
Okay, thank you. We have another Q&A, so let's go to that.
Gary Geeson, Central Logic, ARIN AC, support the policy as written and the problem statement. It codifies the practice already occurring and makes it clear to those on the wait list or to those looking to apply to the wait list what the requirements specifically are.
Thank you. Okay, we go to John O'Brien next, please.
John O'Brien, University of Pennsylvania. Is it a true statement that the non-special use allocation can be used for special uses, but a special use allocation cannot be used for non-special uses? If so, I would be in favor of excluding special uses, address resources. Sorry, that was a little hard to say.
Okay. Sai Matapalli, you've put a question here, but I'm having a hard time understanding. Maybe you could just try clarifying what you're trying to get comments specifically if you're in favor or against the policy. If you could do that, and we'll come back to you. Let's go to Gus.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we answer the question for Mr. O'Brien?
I've asked Sai to put back in because I don't see the question as germane to the policy here. So.
Okay. And Gus Reese, Cogent Communications, I support this policy as written and the problem statement.
Okay. Next comment from Joe Provo.
Joe Provo, Google, ARIN AC, I support as written.
Okay, we're going to close the queues in a second. We'll give Sai a few seconds to type something, otherwise we'll go with his original. If you want to put your hand up, put it up. Okay, Sai, why don't we go to Sai live and we'll go from there. And if at the end of Sai's comments, the Q&A will be closed. So Sai, if you can please give your name and affiliation, and please start with if you're in favor or against the policy.
So my name is Sai Matapalli. I am from Matapalli Technologies, but I am very new to this meeting. I don't know that how to ask a question, because you are asking my opinion about policy, yes or no, or you are asking a question and answer which I have on the policy. You clarify and then take my decision, I support or not.
Well, that's how our policy process works. We ask those who are speaking at the microphone on policy, as is a standard rule of order,
So
to
you
start
are
with.
you are
Start with.
asking.
Let me go first. To start with whether you're in favor or against, and then the reasons for that. I understand you're new to the community. We welcome that. What may make more use is we can have a staff member reach out to you with your question, and they can help that. And if at that time you still want to give some feedback into the policy process, the public policy mailing list is available, and you could put your comment on that. So that would be my suggestion. But if you want to rephrase your question now, okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. So thank you for that. And as I have no other Q&A in the queue, this is going to give one last call, because this will end our policy process, and then I'm going to take us into open microphone. And we're going to try and we've gotten back on track here time-wise, which is good. So we have ample time for open microphone. And we have, of course, our breakout sessions later. But seeing none, we're going to close the microphones on this policy. This ends our policy block for today and ends our policies for the ARIN 47 meeting. So I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. I know that virtual has been a large adjustment to this process. My thanks, of course, to Mike Wilder for stepping in and as well presenting that. So our thanks to the community for this. My thanks to the AC, who will now take all the feedback that has been garnered over these last 2 days. They will be meeting in short order in the next day or so to decide what to do with these policies. If you have some thoughts, we still have the open microphone right here, but there's always the ARIN public policy mailing list. We encourage you to join it, and we encourage you that you can always put your feedback on there. If you don't feel comfortable with that, we will, sorry, apologies. We will, you can always email the Shepherds as well. They're always happy to take your feedback. So with that, we are going to go into open microphone. This is, again, we generally like to have focused on what has come up today. If you've had an idea for a new policy proposal, had a thought on a presentation you've seen, or if there's something else about ARIN, either the organization or the policy process that you'd like to raise, this is the opportunity. We have the CEO here, John Kern, as you can see. We have some of the senior staff on the standby. The AC chair is also here as well. So please raise your hand or put something in the Q&A. And we'll go from there. We'll give it a few seconds. John has told me he has prepared one of the most finest operas to sing, though, in the remaining 20 minutes, if required. I don't know where it came that I said he was an opera singer, but I'm going with it for the rest of me. All right, we have our first 10, so let's go to David Farmer. David, name and affiliation, and what your topic is.
David Farmer, University of Minnesota. There's the fee consultation open. The fee consultation raises a policy question for me.
Okay.
Is it still germane, if that fee consultation goes forward, is it still germane to have a policy difference between
end users and
end users and ISPs or LIRs in the future? And that's a question to the community.
Yeah, so so if somebody wants to, a few things. If you'd like to speak to that, John being the first in queue, on that, please raise your hand on this topic, or put your Q&A, and we'll deal with that. I think the high level is the flexibility of the schedule now is such that, that categories or other categories can be defined, and now we have a unified fee schedule. So it's, we don't get into this issues we've had before where policies seem to be skirting around fee schedules by saying, oh, well, we'll classify you as an end user. That's now disappeared. It's not that end users have disappeared in policy. It's just that there's an ISP end user and ISP fee schedule, which will be the RSP fee schedule if this proposal is adopted after the consultation. So we have two people in queue. We have John Kern, and then we have Kevin Bloomberg. Please raise your hand if you want to speak on this issue. Go ahead, John.
So, David, you bring up a great point. Let's start with IPv6. In IPv6, the space issued for new end user allocations and new ISP allocations is fairly distinct sizes. Organizations can say they want an end user allocation. Organizations can say they want a larger ISP allocation. You might want policy to qualify who can be an ISP. Further, you might want policy to insist on who is an ISP. There's been concerns in the past in the IPv6 community that people will ask for smaller allocations and give still more to their customers. Now, you know, if you want ARIN to be the one enforcing customer allocation size, that's perfectly fine, but the community needs to discuss and agree on that. So you can see where with V6, there's still a great need for policy as to, or there's still a need to discuss how much policy you want. On V4, we get into an interesting situation. We have an enormous amount of V4 policy for issuing new space, initial allocations. And then we have an enormous amount of policy for doing additional allocations and assignments based on those who have already gotten their initials. And it looks like 80 or 90% of that might not be relevant in the going forward scope. And so again, this is there's nothing to say that we can't have policy that is the same policy we have today. The fee schedule doesn't require any policy changes one way or the other. The question you're really asking is, now knowing a good fee structure that's uniform, do we need the same policy that we have? And that's a great question. The question is, what policy do you really want for policy's sake, as opposed to get certain fee outcomes?
Okay.
That's it.
Can we unmute Kevin Bloomberg as well? And just, Kevin, is this the issue you wish to speak on?
Kevin, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, Kevin
Kevin,
Bloomberg, The Wire, and yes, this is what I wanted to speak on. I sort of touched on it earlier, and I agree with David. There is a lot of policy that made the assumption that an end user would not have certain features available to them that ISPs would. As an example, downstream sweeping would now technically be available to all. So all of the rules and requirements that we have in policy related to that should apply to all organizations if they're going to be using that side of things. I believe if we go to one consistent type of organization set from a fee point of view, that our policy should reflect that. A lot of the requirements for end user and ISP were based on things that could or could not be done by the different ones. And I think we need to move to a more holistic view that you have different kinds of organizations that use internet resources. And there may be some exceptions where one type of organization is able to get a smaller assignment or allocation at this point. But I think the whole concept needs to be refreshed if we are now going to one unified set of services across the board. That doesn't mean we don't have differentiation between types of organizations, but I think this whole concept of end user and ISP will need to be completely revisited in policy. It will be utterly confusing otherwise.
Go ahead, John.
If I could briefly respond, Kevin, I agree with you to some extent, but recognize that if you want a policy constraint on how people can use addresses, we need that today, regardless of whether the fee table changes. You have organizations right now that are end users who are subdividing and leasing their IP address space. If that's not allowed, then that's worth knowing. You have organizations that are not providing directory services for the issuance of IP address space to their customers. So your question is valid, but it's not driven by the fee. It's if ARIN's going to have some specific constraints on the use of IP address blocks, and that changes by organization, or even if it doesn't, it should be explicit, and that should be in policy. That's not a fee question. If you have assumptions about how address space is supposed to be used, that needs to be in policy, and presently it isn't.
John, my clarification is irrelevant of the amounts on the fee table. You had two fee structures before. The current discussion is to go to one unified fee structure. And unless I'm misunderstanding that change, everybody is going to have the same set of services and is going to pay the same thing depending on what they're utilizing, but basically you're going from two structures to one. Is that me misunderstanding what's being done?
I'm sorry, you cut out on my end, Kevin. Kevin, yeah, I'm having a problem here.
John Sweeting, John Sweeting is offering to jump in for you, John.
Yeah, I just want to say, to answer Kevin's question, there still are these different types of organizations out there, and there could be policy that says if you are an ISP, that here's how you qualify for space. And there could be end users and it says here's how you qualify for space. It could be that way. It could change, but there is no reason why we can't have policy that's germane to how end users use space and how ISP use their space and how they qualify for more space.
Sorry, John, just to clarify, and this is I think the part that I'm trying to understand. If this change occurs, all organizations, irrespective of whether they are currently delineated as ISP or end user, will have access to all of the same services uniformly offered by ARIN. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and that's why we're looking for the equitable fee being charged.
Right. So if an
Like
end user organization,
but to clarify, John Sweeting, while there'll be a unified fee structure, it is possible there could be services that are only available to certain types of entities based on the policy they qualified. I'm not saying that could still occur, correct? Like if there was a service, if only ISPs could only, send emails in pink, then that could be potentially a service only available if that's what policy said. Yeah, go ahead, John Kern.
John's back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, the internet apparently blipped here. So yes, if you folks want to constrain services by a particular type of user, particular type of organization, you can. However, that's not probably what you want to do. Because quite frankly, long-term, we can't control that. People are capable of spinning up many of these same services on their own, and it's beyond ARIN's control. So what you're really talking about is constraining people to use address blocks only certain ways, okay? If that's what you wish to do, you need to be explicit in doing so. Again, you have end users right now subdividing their address space through leasing, okay? That's happening today. It had nothing to do with the fee schedule, okay? We are presently not enforcing anything. If you believe there's a policy constraint that needs to be enforced there, it needs to be stated about those blocks. That's independent of the fee schedule.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think we're arguing the same thing. All I'm trying to say is end user policy has no concept of downstream assignments allocations. In a homogeneous environment, an end user could take advantage of those services. Our policy needs to be cleaned up to allow for all of the services and to be homogeneous across all of the things. And where there's a differentiation, have that differentiation. But there's a lot of policy that doesn't envision end users having access to quote unquote ISP services, which would no longer be the case. So I think we're all agreeing about the same thing. Just policy needs to be cleaned to if this fee schedule goes forward.
And my only point, Kevin, is policy needs to be cleaned anyway, because even if the fee schedule doesn't go forth, the users will still, it's not what services are available, it's what usage of blocks policy allows. If you're saying blocks can't be sub-allocated, okay, then you need to say it and explain that independent of the fee schedule, because it's happening today, okay? Users are subdividing their blocks today. They're just not having necessarily the services, but it's happening. And so if you're trying to constrain the usage of blocks, it's not a services question. We agree with you. I agree with you that the policy doesn't cover it. And historically, it's been anchored in services, but you don't actually want policy to constrain services. What you want to say is end user allocations may only be used in the following ways. You need to think very carefully about what those policies should be, because we have a large base of end users subdividing their address blocks, leasing with some forms of connectivity that vary from one to another.
Okay, I think
Thank you.
we have to leave it at that. The ARIN consult list is available if you guys still want to keep going at this, but I think we've had a chance to do that. So I have Gary Geeson next. Can we open his microphone, please? Or did we lose Gary? He was there. Oh, there he is. Okay, Gary, you were next, I think.
Gary,
So-
you can unmute yourself now.
So name, affiliation, and the topic, either this one or if it's a new topic, let us know.
Gary Geeson, Central Logic, ARIN AC. It's on this topic. I think that I know policy was never tied to the fee schedule, but the reality is that the big wedge between end user and ISPs was SWIP. And as far as I'm aware, end users could always become an ISP by paying ISP fees. There was no other impediment. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So if end users are now being asked to pay the same fees as ISPs, why wouldn't we just make everyone ISPs? I get for further for swipping downstream that you may want to have some more policy controls, but I think the ISP policy pretty well covers that. So what to Kevin's original point, why would we have two classes of users if everyone's paying the same fees? And historically, the big wedge between the two sets of policies has been to reduce fees and consequently services like SWIP.
Well, so I think I would just disagree a little bit in that there's always been and historically policies that wrap around a certain type of almost use case. And a perfect example, Gary, you'd be familiar with is Canadian TPIA, and that in order to qualify under a certain clause, you had to be a certain type or fit certain criteria. And I don't think the fee schedule is meant to eliminate that. I think, as John Curran said, there may be a useful reevaluation of policy to see if it still makes sense where there are differentiations between certain types of providers, especially since I think, as we said, it's becoming grayer. 20 years ago, an ISP clearly looked like an ISP and an end user clearly looked as an end user. And now it's a little foggier. We have different types of players and different types of entities. John Sweeting, did you have anything to add on that from that standpoint? Or I know you've done a lot of work on this, though.
Yeah, I just want to say that we have end users that for one reason or another, they want to become under an RSP, a registration services plan. With a registration services plan, they can do SWIPs, they can do anything an ISP can do. That is basically how the fee harmonization is going to work. All end users will be converted to being under a registration services plan and will have access to all the services that are available to an RSP as they would do today if they voluntarily did it. So yes, they would be able to SWIP. The RSPs, end users that convert to RSPs today have the ability to SWIP.
Use all those services, yeah. There's no policy preventing, there's no policy today preventing an end user moving to the RSP and thus getting access to services.
Correct. And that's what John was trying to say as well. The services and policies are different things. We have all these services they can use. Your policies would then, if you wanted to keep somebody from swipping a class of customers, I guess you could do it through policy. I don't know why you would, but anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a curious question that we may need to clarify a little bit to both Johns, just if there was a service that the community did not want somebody to have access to, it did not want a certain class having access to, would that be through NERPM or would that be through ACSP? We might take that away as some feedback.
Well, I mean,
John.
Yeah, I mean, if the community passed a policy that says users should not sub-allocate their blocks and must be used for internal customers only, then we wouldn't provide access to a service that violated policy. But I want the policy to constrain the address block usage because that's what the community is really saying. And we have the problem is that we have people who are working around this now, and they'll do it. ARIN services are not sufficient to prevent what you're talking about. You need policy.
I'd like to close off the microphones because we are now at the allotted time that we should be ending for the day. So I will give one last chance to put your hand up. We have one person in queue with their hand up, and I have one Q&A. So we're going to go to the persons with hand up because he's confirmed that he's on topic on this topic, and then we have somebody with a slightly tangential, and then after that we are going to close off. So please either put the word Q in or put your hand up now. Let's go to David Farmer.
I wanted to clarify one thing. You said that, or David Farmer, University of Minnesota. I wanted to clarify one thing. You said that we should discuss this on the ARIN consult list. My personal opinion that the question I raised is a policy question and belongs on the policy mailing list, it's not actually a question about the fee consultation.
So I definitely.
It's a result of the fee consultation, but it's not really a.
So this is when I asked John Kern's head to pop up. Look at that. It's like he just saw it, because that is what I said. And I agree, that would have been my gut. But when it comes to which mailing list to go, John is the expert. So John, did I misspeak? Yeah. Do you think this is a PPML discussion, or?
If you want to change NERPM, it's on PPML. Otherwise, it would be on, if it's on the consultation, we're going to discuss. We no longer have, sorry, I apologize. So David, what do you want to discuss?
What I raised the question as was, as a result of the potential change, there are some policies that we probably need to change, which is why I said, I think it's a policy question, not a consultation question.
Right. And I'm going to ask an interesting question, David. In general, that means it's on PPM. That should be on PPML.
Yep.
Do you think shouldn't those policies change in any case, regardless of whether the fee change goes through?
There's an argument for that. But
I take it to PPML.
Yeah. I think there's an argument for that. But I think the fee consultation changes the rightness of those questions, is what I would say.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure, I agree. I think there's a number of policy cleanup issues that should be considered, and now potentially they need to be expeditiously considered.
Yes.
So I think, like David, and this is one of the problems, is if it affects your feeling on whether or not the board should proceed with the fee change or not, that should be on consult. Yeah. But if it's a general policy change, it's a good idea, just because of the thought of the fee consultation, definitely PPML. And if there's expeditious changes that the fee schedule, probably in PPML, I don't think it would hurt to put it on consult so that we can get the AC thinking about it. But
thank you. That was all I wanted to talk about. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, but I'll do that on PPML.
Okay, thank you for that, David. So the queues are now closed. The Q&A is now closed. We have our last comment from Mercedes from the signing group. Can we have that, please?
Yes, Mercedes Arnold with the Obsidian Group. Does ARIN do policy position papers on the expected usage of ARIN resources as services and as addresses now that types of players have diversified from the dichotomy of ISP or end users? I have no interest in the fee debate.
So I don't know if I'd use the word policy papers, but we do publish documents clarifying the policy of the community. But John clearly has some thoughts on this, so I will defer to you on this.
It's an excellent question, actually. So ARIN, the registry, stays away from usage of IP resources, except to the extent that it's covered by the Registration Services Agreement, which is some very base level requirements, and or it's covered in policy. So in general, we don't actually police the usage of IP address blocks, other than when someone comes back and looks for an additional block, or other than there's a report of something going amiss with the usage of an address block. Because we're not involved in the usage of those blocks, and it isn't necessarily needed for us for the administration of the registry. We do not do policy position papers. There's a number of organizations that make use of their address blocks in all sorts of ways that ARIN has historically not been involved in enforcing. Again, the same community that asks ARIN to potentially consider how address blocks are being used and potentially enforce is the same one that asks us not to. So at a high level, no, ARIN does not do policy position papers. We would not propose to tell the community what an appropriate usage of an address block is. However, I think if anyone has any thoughts on whether there should be a distinction in policy between end users and ISPs and what constraints each should have on their usage of their address blocks, that's a great thing to write up your thoughts and send to PPML, because for us to do anything about that, it has to end up in the policy manual.
Thank you for that, John. And thank you, everyone. That ends our open microphone for today. So I'll go into some closing talks. So thank you very much to everyone that's participated here in day 2 of ARIN 47. We thank you. Please make sure you submit a meeting survey so you can win an iPad Air, a very exciting device. Just take you a few minutes. Just go to the link that you see below and is being fired out to you by email as well every morning. Next slide, please. Again, our thanks to our bronze sponsor. I'm gonna ask John to say the name because I'm gonna botch it. I feel bad.
It's Team Cymru.
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 Thank you for saying it, John. There.
Cymru.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to our sponsor, a bronze sponsor. We appreciate their support and again their talk. I know that there was lots of great feedback. And just a reminder, if you do have feedback on that new format, please let staff know because that was an experiment this time. If you'd like to see it as a more permanent edition, we'd love to get your feedback. Next slide, please. So our final day tomorrow, we're all done in the policy aspect. Tomorrow is the ARIN members meeting, but the ARIN members meeting is open to all. So we'll have great discussions from staff on key areas. You'll hear from the AC chair, the treasurer of the organization, and me on exciting topics. We also have a panel discussion on transfer market trends that staff put together. So to give a little bit of excitement and difference, so something for you to come again tomorrow at noon. Next slide, please. So we have breakout sessions today. These are normally the table topics for those that have attended that we normally have at lunch. So we're going to try some virtual table topics. There was some question because we are running a bit late, so it wasn't quite the threshold, but we will say they start at 3:50 today. We'll give you an extra 5 minutes so you can quickly go refresh your coffee, bathroom break. But you can go to the link there in the registration portal or arin.sugu.com/ARIN47, and we have 6 breakout rooms that you can join. It's a very free-form discussion. It's not like this panel. If you're at the social last night, very similar. So just a regular Zoom meeting where you can go, very casual. Please feel free if you're a newcomer to just either come listen or speak or give your view on any of these topics. So terminology in the number of resource policy manuals, pandemic impact on ARIN and stakeholders, RPKI deployment best practices, how to join the AC, NRPM number resource policy manual policy suggestions, and just a general lobby bar coffee chat conversation area. Next slide, I think there's one more, right? So how to get there, there's go to the virtual enhancement page and click the link for the breakout sessions. And if there's no other announcements that staff want to bring up, we will end today's formal meeting. You have till 3:50 to refresh up and join these Zoom rooms. Thank you all for your participation, and we will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
And stay safe.